welcome everyone to the Pitkin County Board of County Commissioners regular session here on Wednesday, May 28th. And there are three of us in the room today. Myself, your board chair, Kelly McNicholas Curry, Greg Postman, and Jeffrey Woodruff. Francie Jacober is joining us online, and Patty Clapper has a family obligation celebration today and will be joining us later this afternoon. Are there any additions or deletions to today's agenda, Mr. Peacock?
There are no additions or deletions to the agenda.
Okay, then I will go ahead and open the public comment. Now this is for public comment on matters that are not listed for public comment later in today's public hearings. So I know, I'm guessing a few of you are here for an item later today. Is there anyone in the room or online who wishes, and if this is on the entrance, then we'll wait till the entrance. Okay, great.
I'm here. So
Great.
You
yes.
get to hear from me.
Perfect. So happy. Thank you.
Hi there, Mike Maple. Thanks for being here. You didn't do a roll call, though. You don't do that? No? Okay, good.
Is Mike Maple here?
Anyways, since I'm here, I have 3 or 4 comments I wanted to pass along to you. First of all, outside your building, your beautiful, relatively new building, of which my wife was one of the architects on, there is a rather unsightly fence that has been there for months and months and months. I think it's inappropriate. Our buildings ought to look as good as they can look, and I don't know why it's there, but please remove it. Secondly, I want to commend the county for only allowing, let's see if I'm going to get this right. There's several different types of e-bikes. They're categorized 1, 2, and 3. Can't remember what the term that goes in front of 1 is, but my understanding of the county's regulations is only, can somebody help me? Is it phase 1, category 1? Class 1, there you go. Only class 1 e-bikes are allowed on trails such as the Rio Grande. I think that's a completely appropriate policy, although I question the level of enforcement. I think that there's a lot of class 2 and class 3 e-bikes screaming down the Rio Grande Trail on a regular basis. So on the one hand, thank you. On the other hand, please do more enforcement. And thirdly, and this is perhaps most important from my personal perspective as a City of Aspen resident, I encourage you to work with the city to have a standard policy. And I believe that the standard policy is that there should only be class 1 e-bikes on our multi-use trails. Thirdly, over the last couple of years, there was a debate and discussion about the opening and closing of Upper Castle Creek as well as Maroon Creek roads. It was, as I recall, it was debated a couple of years ago, and then it was pushed to the side. And after a bunch of public comment, it came back a year or 2 later, and the county proceeded with exactly what was originally proposed, which was an early closing of Upper Castle Creek Road and a late opening of Castle Creek Road. The Upper Castle Creek Road is a primary access point for our public lands, and while it may be difficult, expensive, problematic in certain years to open Upper Castle Creek Road earlier than later, that's not always the case, and this year it was exactly that way. I went up there to access the backcountry at the end of April. I can't remember what the date was, but it was in the 20s. And I was very dismayed to see that the gate was closed at the King Cabin, despite the fact that the road was 99% dry. There was absolutely no problem accessing the road. There was very, very little or no expense that needed to be incurred to clean up a few tiny piles of snow. to allow the public to access that land. So I was greatly dismayed with the policy when it was enacted to not open that road until May 15th. And this year was a prime example of when that road could have and should have been opened. It's also a safety issue. As you may or may not know, there was an accident, or actually a couple of accidents the weekend after I was up there that required that were done by self-rescue. The way that the people were able to implement their rescue was to drive around the fence or the gate. And I'm glad they were able to do that. But I think that this policy of not opening the gate until May 15th is misguided and should be much more weather dependent than schedule dependent. I will also say that I am aware that the road did eventually get opened before May 15th, but it was, in my opinion, 2 or 3 weeks too late given the condition of the road for the benefit of the public to access their lands. And those are, I think, my 3 points. I said there might be 4, but I've lost the last one. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Are there other individuals in person or online that wish to make public comment on items not on the agenda? Come on up.
Hi, for the record, my name is Tony Kronberg, and this morning when I was coming up Valley, it was really exciting to see the concrete trucks pouring the bridge from Aspen Village over to the Rio Grande Trail. So that was really exciting. And then I'm looking forward to the 2 bridges, one connecting from Brush Creek to Rio Grande and from the Airport Business Center to Rio Grande. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and that was Tony Kronberg, for the record.
Kronberg, yeah.
Yes. All right. I do not see other folks here or online wishing to make public comments, so I will close public comments and go to commissioner comments. I'll kick us off. I will congratulate everyone on a successful school year as folks are wrapping up. I know in the Roaring Fork School District this week and in Aspen School District next week. And many congratulations to all the new graduates, either moving on to college or into new schools and new grades, and to the teachers for all their hard work this year. And good luck to all the parents sorting out camp schedule for the summer. I'm in it. All right. Are there other commissioner comments? Not seeing any. Francie?
Yes, thank you, Kelly. I just wanted to mention that there have been some unfortunate deaths of calves due to wolves that were reintroduced to Pickton County. And I want to remind everybody that the CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, did not authorize this reintroduction. It was a voter-approved ballot issue in the state of Colorado, and CPW are doing their jobs. They are mandated to manage this, and they're working at it really hard. So please thank them when you see them, and please don't try to blame these depredations on CPW. They are working hard. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Francie. Okay, and I think that's it. So let's move on to our consent agenda. We have one item, which is the minutes of our May 14th regular meeting. Are there any corrections to those minutes or a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Second.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Jeffrey. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We got a thumbs up from you, Francie?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right. Moving on to individual consideration items. This is a first reading and will be heard for public hearing on June 11th. A resolution of the BoCC authorizing the chair to sign an intergovernmental agreement with the state of Colorado enabling the geothermal energy tax credit for our airport, Aspen Airport Business Center thermal energy network design study. Hi, we have J.R. Fielding. Hi, nice to see you.
Hi, thanks Kelly and the board. I'm J.R. Fielding, the Construction and Asset Director. And as was lined out by the title today before you is authorization to accept a tax credit. Over the last several years, the Colorado Energy Office has had various programs, and the board may remember that we have been awarded a grant to further our feasibility study for the thermal energy network out at the AABC. And actually today we are out there drilling right now as part of this program. During the round 2 of announcements, they put forward this tax credit, which is administered very much like a grant, but it is considered a tax credit. And so we've been awarded $130-something thousand through this, and we can get that back after we complete the work. We will file those with our 2025 tax credits that we have for a couple of these energy projects that we have going on. I anticipate that for the work that will be covered under this will be the final portion of our feasibility study, and this is setting up the county to be able to go into a design phase if it looks like it is a good option for any of the future development out at the airport, any retrofits or potential new development at our public works facility, and can also be incorporated into the Aspen maintenance facility that's operated by RAFTA.
Ready for questions?
Sure.
Questions for GR? Which tax are we paying that this is a credit offset to?
You know, Kelly, that was something that staff certainly had to wrap our heads around.
I was like, am I missing basic government finance here?
So I think it was about a year and a half ago that Michael Port and I had a good conversation with Liz Woods to understand that we don't file taxes, but if we did, we can get rebates and refunds like this, where we are spending money on very specific programs. So we now do file taxes as a county to be able to exercise our ability to retrieve these funds.
Excellent.
It does not obligate us to pay them, though.
Okay. I was like these interesting construction of some of these programs. So this is great. I'm glad we can take advantage of it. Any further questions for GR on this? And just an opportunity to celebrate this really cool program that we're doing out there, which is very innovative and creates additional sustainability for our systems.
Yes, and the staff will be out in the near future participating in some of the local events in discussing the thermal energy networks and that. And we got looped into a lot of that based on the Colorado Energy Office and our communications with them over the grant and tax programs that they have.
All right.
Great. Exciting.
Okay, so this is a first reading. Is there a motion to approve this resolution to enter into the IGA with the state of Colorado? Thank you, Francie. Is
I'll
there a
second
second? All right, motion from Francie, second from Greg. Any further discussion?
I think it's great that we're looking for what seems to be obvious ways of working with energy right beneath our feet that have been there all along, and it's about time we started trying to employ them. So I think this is really great. I had another idea about energy storage, which I want to share with you at some point, but I'll save the television audience from having to hear it. Talk to you later about that.
Okay. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks, everyone. Thanks, GR. And I think you are going to present on the next one, if that's correct.
Yes.
This is a public hearing and a second reading of an ordinance approving a lease agreement with the Harvest for Hunger for space at our Michael W. Schultz Health and Human Services building.
Again, I'm G.R. Fielding, the construction and asset director, and I am filling in for Jody Grady. She has some family matters to attend to today. And this is second reading to approve the lease for not-for-profit that operates out of the HHS building. The county had recently gone out to RFP to provide these services out of there, and the Harvest for Hunger folks were the proposer who was selected to fulfill this service. I think the board has talked about this at first reading, and then also probably got some update from Lindsay Mason, their staff, yesterday. So I'll keep this one a little bit more brief.
Okay, have there been any changes, as you know, from first to second reading?
No, none that I know of.
Okay, any other questions for GR? Okay, I will go ahead and open this to public hearing if anyone wishes to comment on this lease agreement between the county and Harvest for Hunger. Let's see, is that a hand raised? I see Gray. Hi, Gray.
Hey, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Gray, go ahead and tell us your full name so everyone has the benefit of knowing who you are.
My name is Gray War. I am the Executive Director of Harvest for Hunger, and we are very appreciative of this opportunity.
Okay.
I guess all I wanted to say was we're working on it, and we are going to hold a grand opening ribbon cutting on June 9th at 10 a.m., and we'd love to have someone from the board to be there.
Okay, thank you for the invitation. We will figure out who's available to attend, and maybe multiples of us will. And thanks for letting the public know that the services will be available starting on June 9th.
Yes, ma'am, June 9th, and then it'll be Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Open 40 hours a week.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other members of the public who wish to comment on this lease agreement? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion or a motion.
I keep looking over to see if Patty's there.
She's
Sorry.
not, no.
I would just say I'm looking forward to seeing them get this up and rolling and wish them the best with it. And I'll try to make it to the opening if I can. And good luck.
Can I have a motion to
And I'll
approve
make
the
a motion to
ordinance,
approve
please?
it. How about that?
That sounds
I'll
great.
second.
Motion by Greg, second by Francie. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, GR. All right, item number 4, also a public hearing. This is a resolution of the BoCC approving a memorandum of understanding with the City of Aspen and the town of Snowmass Village to support creation of a regional housing needs assessment.
Good afternoon.
Pearl, hi.
Hi, I'm Ashley Pearl, Resiliency and Housing Director for Picken County. This is the second read, so the board saw this 2 weeks ago. I apologize for not being here. Kara presented because I was out. There's nothing changed since you last saw this. I believe there were 2 questions that the board had from last time that I'm happy to address. One was around the City of Aspen's procurement policy for the $131,000 contract that we're supporting. The city holds the contract with EPS, and then we're giving a third of that contract financially. The city RFP'd for a different housing-related analysis. They put out an RFP for a rental study on all of APSHA and City of Aspen owned rental properties. They hired EPS, and then they adjusted the contract via a sole source, which is in their policy, to have EPS run this housing needs assessment. I don't know exactly how many, but I know there's only a small number of contractors who can do a housing needs assessment in compliance with both Prop 123 housing needs assessment guidelines and state legislation housing needs assessment guidelines. And very few of them are available to start within the next 2 years, and EPS was available. So we're lucky that they were able to get EPS on board to do that. That was one question I think was asked last time. And the other was from Kelly recommending that the data on the market studies is robust, because you've heard some other feedback in other places that that's maybe what doesn't allow for Prop 123 higher AMI waiver to be accepted. And I do believe the EPS is the one who has put in one of the only successful Prop 123 AMI waivers, so they're using the same data collection and kind of process they use for that successful one.
Questions? Jeffrey?
So the two municipalities in the county basically supply the housing needs assessment for the entire valley, and we're the only financial contributors, even though it's Aspen to Parachute?
So we will get something different. The data is being pulled from Aspen to Parachute. Aspen, City of Aspen, Town of Basalt, and Picken County will receive legislatively approved as well as Prop 123 compliant housing needs assessments for our own jurisdictions. And then we will have like an umbrella general data collection effort that will mirror the 2019 study. So it's essentially an update to the 2019 study that was funded by similar partners. So you are correct in that there will be benefits to those outside of those three jurisdictions, to those who aren't paying. However, the bulk of the benefit will fall directly to those who are paying.
Go ahead.
And the 2023 or the 2019 are not sufficient to meet the new state guidelines?
So
Or
2019.
couldn't you just take the 2013 Northwest COG report and say, here you go, we're eligible?
No, unfortunately, the 2019 regional housing study is a regional housing study. It's not a technical housing needs assessment, nor does the 2023 Northwest COG report meet either the Prop 123 requirements or the state legislation requirements.
Can we get a waiver and say 23 is great?
Unfortunately,
It seems like we're
no.
spending money on PowerPoint rather than on people.
The 2023 Northwest COG was too wide of a net that was cast. It's not specific enough to each jurisdiction. We actually had to ask special permission for this, for our region to even comply. And so we've already kind of pushed the boundaries of what is allowed. We did explore that. We tried to not spend money, frankly, and go through a whole new process. I will say the preliminary data that I've seen from EPS is higher quality than anything I've seen so far. So I do think just from Picken County, we're not required to comply with the state legislation, and we are on the fence of whether or not we're going to go through a Prop 123 waiver. However, even that, I think we're going to get great benefit from what I've seen so far. So I know it seems like a lot of data collecting. I do think, given that we have a new property tax to go towards housing, I'm excited to have some better, really discrete data for Picken County. I think it will help inform how we spend that property tax dollars and some of our long-term planning around that. So.
And before I go to you, Francia, just can you illustrate what some of that discrete data will be?
You're going to put me on the spot.
Sorry.
So you all have seen when we were preparing to put the property tax question on the ballot, some of our own Picken County collected real estate data. I brought in like median house purchase numbers, what's for sale in the market, rental availability, some of that. That was collected just in-house by us. I will say, to see what a consultant can collect in the same area with a lot more human power behind it is impressive. They add just a lot more granularity to some of that data, is some of the stuff I've seen. It's just preliminary, so I expect a lot more to come.
Okay. I would say I hope to see the output of this would look at like every different type of housing type and the availability and demand across AMIs in our county and region. I think would be really great, and it would answer a lot of questions about where demand among household incomes is least filled. I think would be super helpful.
That is certainly data that you will receive. Okay. That's kind of just baseline. It builds on top of that even.
Okay. And then let me go to Francie.
Thank you, Kelly.
Sure.
I had the same concerns as Jeffrey. It just seems, I understand this is required under Prop 123, but couldn't the Regional Housing Coalition take this on instead of hiring somebody from outside? We already have so much data that you guys collected. Does it not meet the requirements, the amount of data that we already have?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. We asked the same questions, Francie. The last I checked, there had been 13 waivers submitted to DOLA to increase their Prop 123 AMI numbers, and 2 of those had been accepted and the others had been rejected. So if Aspen and Snowmass definitely want to apply for a Prop 123 waiver, so they were going to move on this level of housing needs assessment regardless, because they know that they have to be really competitive to receive approval of that waiver. They said, we're going to do it for Snowmass and Aspen. Do you all want to chip in to get it for unincorporated Picken County? At the time, we didn't think we were going to apply for a Prop 123 waiver. Some things have changed with some of our funding things, especially at Phillips. I think having a Prop 123 waiver compliant housing needs assessment will at least open up opportunities for us when it comes to Phillips and some other housing projects we're working on. I'm equally frustrated. I think having both the legislation that requires a separate kind of way of doing a housing needs assessment from the really stringent Prop 123, and then having to layer those on top, it makes for a really kind of specific housing needs assessment that we have to bring in.
The other component that I think the board needs to consider is the executive order that came out. And again, even though we don't have to comply with this, a lot of the grants are discretionary grants, so a determination that we're not in compliance, whether we have to be or not, may impact funding. So we're trying to eliminate any doubts on the table. Although we started this before, in all fairness, executive order, but it's one more piece that we think makes this necessary.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll just say, I definitely think we need to apply for the waiver because, accepting Prop 123 funds means that you lock all those units in at 100% AMI for 30 years, which is limiting to who we can house in our community. And so being able to bump that up is going to provide a lot more flexibility for, just the higher income levels that we make here in the resort community. So yeah, government at its best. These are some hoops to jump through to receive some funding that I think will help us achieve our goals, hopefully down the road. Okay, this is a public hearing. So are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this housing needs assessment funding? An MOU. I'm not seeing any. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing on this item and bring it back to the board for further discussion or a motion.
Quick question.
Yes,
Just
Greg.
when it comes back, we approve this, the money comes, we begin the assessment. The scope of work has been articulated. I'm just trying to remember when she visited us last, EPS. Is that Elizabeth somebody?
It's a different team from
Oh, it's different.
EPS.
Okay.
They're contracted directly with the city of Aspen.
Got
So
it.
the city
Okay.
manages the scope and the contract. The
I-
next time it'll come back to you all will be the final report.
Okay.
And EPS will be able to present that so we can understand
All
all
right.
the details
I
of
was
it.
just concerned that if the scope of work is too broad, if the description or the premise, the assumptions they make, I thought somewhere in the back of my head I had a little red flag that came up and said, when she presented last time, there were a couple things that just made me wonder. Of course, everybody. The premise is there's not enough housing for anyone here, right? But is the solution to create as much as we can for everyone? It was almost that broad, and I'm being a little bit flip with it because I don't have it in front of me. But I just want to make sure that we all take a really good look at the scope of the work we're asking for, and then understand that when we look at the value of the data that we're reviewing.
Yeah, and it won't come with recommendations. It will only be a housing needs assessment. So it will show kind of what Kelly was talking about, across both rental and ownership needs, the discrete income categories, and kind of in certain income categories, are you more in need of rental? Are you more in need of ownership? Kind of what's the magnitude of need within that certain income category? So it will only demonstrate need
Just pure data.
according to both the legislation and the Prop 123 requirements, which are slightly different. So you'll get it will be pretty broad in how it looks at it to comply with both of those, but it won't suggest any recommendations. I think that will be for conversation here at this table.
So we'll have some robust interpretation and figure out how to move from there once we have that. That'll help
Yeah.
us.
I don't
Okay.
think you will be surprised by any of the data.
Probably not, yeah. Thank you.
The next step's a housing strategic plan.
There you go. All right.
Is there a
You need-
motion to
I'll
approve
make a
this
motion.
resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Thank you, Greg. Is there a second? I'll second. Any further discussion?
I just want to give you a heads up that I'm going to be a no on this. And it's because I think it is ridiculous like, that we have to do this. We understand the housing situation in our area. And so this is not a no vote against you, Ashley, or Aspen or Snowmass. It's just, it's overkill, it's expensive, and, but I'm curious to know how you're going to vote, Jeffrey.
I'll take an abstain.
Okay.
Well, then I don't believe, have the votes to forward this, and I may ask Greg to withdraw his.
Wait a minute. If we were to vote now, we'd have one abstain, one no, and two yeses. Is that not enough to move us along?
I don't know. I'm looking at the county attorney.
I believe, I'll double check the charter, but I believe you need 3 votes to
Oh.
pass a resolution.
Oh, well then.
And I just, if I could sway you at all, Francie, I mean, I would say both Proposition 123 and the legislation, passed at the state level enacting these things were products of lots of negotiation. They did not occur along the same timelines to where they could have synced up the requirements. Frankly, the allowance of a waiver process was in many ways a win for our community. And, as you may or may not recall, I mean, I tried really hard in the discussions about the Prop 123 language creation. The current Denver mayor really drove that, and I had very early conversations with him about the importance and need for allowing higher AMIs in the resort communities to make it viable. Was something I really tried to impress upon him. It was not accepted as part of the language of this ballot measure. There continues to be quite a lot of misunderstanding in the Front Range communities about just how expensive housing is up here, just how distorted our real estate markets are up here. So the waiver process was a bit of a bone thrown to us to allow some opportunity to take advantage of these sources of fundings. Without which we won't have any access to. Well, we could have some access to, but it would hamstring us to only doing 100% AMI housing, which sure there's great need for it, but it is not the totality of need that we know our housing programs need to meet up here. And similarly, the legislation passed at the state level. Creating these requirements, was the product of negotiations. It would be great if all of these things lined up. Perhaps some cleanup legislation in the future will allow for that. But I think what Ashley has brought to us is, our need to accommodate the product of all those negotiations in order to access opportunities for funding that frankly, our taxpayers pay into. The Prop 123 is a portion of an income tax that's dedicated and set aside. And this is our opportunity to be able to bring some of that back to Pickens County.
No,
So
I do remember all that, Kelly, and I really thank you for reminding me about the details. But tell me if I'm correct on this. Isn't one of the stipulations under Proposition 123 that if you are participating in it, you have to guarantee that you're going to increase your housing by a certain percent, which means for us, 3%, I think it is, something like that, of 3,450 housing, and we already have, is a lot of units every year. Is that still part of it?
we did opt into Prop 123. I'll let Ashley provide a more robust answer to the requirement for that. I don't remember if you supported that opt-in or not. I think it was direction to staff. But
I don't recall the details of how we opted in, but I do know we brought it to the board. By signing on to Prop 123, we committed to increasing housing 3% by 2020, end of 2026, I believe. And the numbers were quite low. Francie, I did the same kind of initial calculation you did. I believe it was 8 units a year.
102. Or it's divided by a certain number of years. How many years?
No, because they didn't use 3,000 units as the calculation. They used a much smaller number. I want to say
Who's
it was
that?
like we
Who's
were on
that?
the hook for 8 or 9 units a year, so times 3, we're under 30 units total, which, if you all remember, we said our goal for the next 10 years was 250 new units with the property tax. So I think that if we apply for Prop 123 funding and then get a waiver approved for that particular project and then actually receive the funding and can put it to use, I don't think that we're going to be pushing the bounds on what we were going to do anyway. The only project that Pickens County would use it on is Phillips, which is 32 new units. So we would, I just think it would be a non-issue at that point. But
We spread those 32 units out over 3 years?
yes.
Or do we have to do it again next year?
No, you can spread them out.
It's also worth noting that when we discussed this, we also talked about the consequences of not complying, if we are unable to meet that, which is just not qualifying for the next year's grant cycle.
Fine. Call the vote.
Was that acquiescence?
yes, I think so.
Yes, unhappily.
All right. Well, I appreciate this. And just as you may recall, the opting into Prop 123 not only opened up the opportunity for the local governments to access these funds, but any nonprofits or housing, affordable housing developers that work in our county as well. Okay. Well,
That's
thanks.
a
I'll
good
leave it at
selling
that.
point.
I'll leave it at that. And thank you. So I will call the question. Greg moved, I seconded for a resolution approving the memorandum with the city of Aspen, Town of Snowmass Village to support a regional housing needs assessment. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I have 3 of us. Jeffrey?
Woodruffson abstain.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone need
Thank
an
you,
out-of-date
Ashley.
housing needs assessment?
Thank you, Francie.
Okay. Moving on to item number 5, this is an ordinance of the BoCC authorizing acquisition of property described as Triangle Park Lofts, Unit R338 at 231 Robinson Street, Basalt. For purposes of employee housing, we have our newly appointed airport director, bravo. Yeah. Hi, Diane and Greg with the airport. Nice to see you guys. Please go ahead and remind us what we're doing here on second reading.
Second read to approve the purchase of 338 in the Triangle Lofts Apartments in Willits, 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment with assigned parking underground for employee use of the airport and county otherwise if there wasn't an airport user. Funds all taken out of the enterprise fund for the airport. I have the PowerPoint if you'd like to see the pictures again. Because Diane and I are remote to this one, I'd have to shuffle between the PowerPoint and our camera view, but happy to do that if you'd like to see the comparables or any of the photos of the unit again.
Okay, let me check in with staff. Are you guys satisfied with what you've received in the packet? And would you like
Yes.
Greg to present? I think we're okay. Remind us again what the purchase price is for this, please.
It was $720,000. We've had close to 5,000 reduced off of that, but then we'll probably see it again in closing costs and other things. We just had the 5,000 reduced from the agreed upon closing price just because of some deficiencies with the unit that our facilities team can handle internally.
Okay, sounds good. Any further questions? I'm seeing none. Let me go ahead and open this to public hearing. This is an ordinance for a purchase of an employee housing unit in Basalt. Can you check if anyone's online, please? If you wish to make a public comment, please raise your hand. All right, I will go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for discussion or a motion, please.
Motion to approve.
Greg, is there a second? Second by Francie. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. Nice to see you guys. Thanks a lot.
Members, I didn't realize our mic wasn't on earlier, so thank you.
Good.
Thanks and congrats.
Oh, thank
We're
you.
glad you're at
Yay.
the driving the bus, so to speak. Flying the plane.
Flying the plane, yeah.
Yeah, we're very happy about it, Diane.
No, thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone's support, and I'm looking forward to working with everyone.
Good. All right. All right, moving on to item number 6, a resolution approving a fourth amendment to a contract with Colorado Department of Human Services Behavioral Health Administration providing funding for jail-based behavioral services. Hi, Dan.
Dan Fallon, I'm the division chief of the jail, and I'm here hoping that you will approve.
Oh, turn your mic on, red light on, please.
Thought it was on, sorry. Dan Fallon, I'm the division chief of the jail here in Pickens County, and I'm here asking you to approve grant funds acceptance. Now, I know we had a discussion last time about the contract saying 0 and that the funds are open to changing. Well, I got an email from the state with another one of the forms based on the budget issues that have gone on with the state so far this year. They reduced the funding by $5,000, and that was across the board for other things. So it's $178,000 is our budget versus $183,000. And I didn't have a chance to send in that new form, but I can get that sent to all you guys as well. So that is the only change in our money that's anticipated for this year.
Great.
Okay, so I'm looking so we should amend language in the resolution in the, looks like 7th whereas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th whereas clause. To read amended contract number 4 attached here to is Exhibit A in the amount of $178,000.
Yes, and I'll get that sent over when I get back to my desk.
Okey-doke. All right, any questions for Dan? All right, let me open this for a public hearing. Again, this is a resolution approving this amendment to the contract for jail-based behavioral services funding. Anyone wishes, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public comment and bring it back to the board. Is there a discussion or a motion?
Just want to say thanks for following up on this, and looks like we're gonna, everything's moving forward. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Important
Thank
stuff,
you.
and I could make a motion to approve.
Can you approve with my suggested amendment to the resolution?
Oh, yes.
Greg has
I
a motion to
second with the
approve.
amendment.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion?
Just saddened to see the closure in Mesa today of the behavioral health department. So
Oh, really?
Haven't seen that.
you guys have to read the Grand Junction Sentinel.
Or not.
There's a lot of things I fit into a day. That's not always.
That hasn't been one of them,
not
but maybe
always
I'll
one
take a
them.
look
Some
at
days,
it.
some days it is, but today was not that day. Okay,
Thank you.
yes, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank
Great,
you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, here we are moving on. I'm gonna text Patty Clapper real quick. 'Cause I'm not sure if she wanted to be on. Okay. This is an individual consideration. This is a one read item. We had continued this from several weeks ago for a resolution endorsing the reevaluation of the entrance to Aspen Record of Decision and its supporting environmental impact statement. And I will turn it over. It looks like Andrew Knapp is here. And then after Andrew presents to us, I'll have a little bit of discussion with the board, and then we'll go to public comment. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Board. Andrew Knapp, the county engineer, here to bring back the item that was discussed on May 14th. As Kelly said, there's a resolution before the board to support the reevaluation of the current record of decision. And at our prior two appearances before the board, we had a PowerPoint presentation giving a quick overview of the basics, and happy to present that again if there's a desire, or can turn it back to the board for further discussion.
Is there interest for a representation that we've heard twice from Andrew? Or do we feel? Okay, I think.
Well framed.
Well, we can hear it a third time. It's an important topic.
I certainly appreciate not doing it a third time.
Might not be the last time, though.
Yes. I'm sure this isn't the last time the entrance is discussed.
No, it won't be. Okay, well, I don't think we need the full presentation. Was there anything else you wish to say to the board?
As it was left on the last meeting, the board wanted to meet with the EOTC board to have further discussion with other elected officials from the different municipalities, and I think you guys were able to do that, and I wasn't able to attend, but I would like to hear your thoughts on that meeting.
Okay, and we will bring some of that up in discussion, I think. All right. If there's nothing else from Andrew, I will say I think we all as a board have received some proposed amendments from Commissioner Woodruff for our consideration to accept as friendly amendments on this. And I don't know if you have had any, Jeffrey, if you've had any edits, I would invite you to read them, or if you would like me to read what you gave me, I'm happy to do that. And then we can have a little bit of discussion about that, and then that gives the public an opportunity to hear what amendments we might be considering for this resolution, and so if they wish to comment on those during public comment, they will have the opportunity to. Does that work?
That's perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
so there were, so my friendly amendments to the resolution were really based on the 2007 HDR final EIS. So they were not really anything outside of what was presented by HDR in that report, barring one.
Jeffrey, could you read out what those,
No more acronyms.
please read the whole thing instead of the acronyms, because I don't know them and I imagine other
So
people don't.
HDR was the engineer who provided the FEIS in 2007. And so the 5 whereas that I proposed are whereas the entrance to Aspen, the ETA, and the ROD, the record of decision, aim to reduce traffic on State Highway 82. The current proposed entrance to Aspen does not reduce traffic to 1993, 1994 traffic levels. That's number 1. Number 2, whereas the entrance to Aspen and record of decision aim to recover the loss of wildlife habitat, there may be increased motor vehicle wildlife impacts due to loss of wildlife habitat and fragmentation. Again, directly from the HDR FEIS in 2007. Whereas the entrance to Aspen record of decision do not recognize the 30 years of growth in the use of RAFTA. Number 4, whereas the entrance to Aspen and record of decision do not recognize the emergency access needs for mutual aid in the Roaring Fork Valley. And number 5, whereas the entrance to Aspen and Record of Decision do not alleviate congestion at the roundabout, the Federal Highway Authority and the Colorado Department of Transportation should work with Public Works to reduce vehicular traffic in the roundabout. Period.
Okay. Thank you.
I wanted to-
Yes, go ahead. You want to respond?
I would love to offer, and I talked to Jeffrey about this, the Record of Decision actually stretched all the way out to Service Center Road, as I understand it. The scope of work, I think, should include consideration of the entire 6-mile stretch out to the Brush Creek Park and Ride. If we're really trying to work on mobility in the Upper Valley, I think it absolutely has to start as far down as that. And I want to, if we're going to add these whereases, I'd like to make mention of that somehow in these, unless someone has a reason not to. So i.e. the current entrance to Aspen, ROD, all that, don't go far enough if we're really trying to solve mobility issues that weren't contemplated as back, or they hadn't been fully considered in 93, 2007, as clearly as they seem to be now. So this is a resolution of encouragement. We understand that it doesn't carry an awful lot of weight with CDOT. They're going to do what they're going to do, but I think if we're going to weigh in this early, I think this is how I would like to propose we do it.
May I ask clarification? Would you propose a 6th whereas statement, perhaps?
I was thinking Jeffrey could incorporate it into number 5, perhaps.
Okay.
Unless he'd prefer to add a 6th. I don't want to ruin your wonderful document.
Maybe do not alleviate congestion at the roundabout or down to Brush Creek or as far as Brush Creek Park and Ride.
I think so, if that seems clear.
If I may.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
So I would argue, I would add that Greg's point, and I think we did discuss it at the last meeting as well, is that actually light rail terminates at Service Center Road. So the way the ROD and the FEIS were drafted didn't consider extending the solution all the way to the Park and Ride. So
Because
I
it was
would
light rail, yeah.
I would offer that it's a 6th whereas.
Okay.
It's separate from identifying solutions at the roundabout per se.
Thank you. If you are willing to wordsmith that, I'll probably approve it or second it or something.
May I point out to the board that
I'm not reopening anything. Sorry. Yeah.
Just for clarification, a reevaluation is looking at the original EIS, which has that fixed project limits. I don't think you can expand the project limits as a part of a reevaluation.
Now, can I ask on that track, the one thing I was going to ask you about is I could imagine us going with option 2, which seems to be the quicker, it's the expedient way to support in the process. If CDOT or the feds look at this and realize the situation has changed enough to warrant more examination, they're going to go ahead and do that. So I'd like to, I guess I'm not asking that they reopen it, but I'm holding up the possibility that that's maybe part of the consideration as they look at this. Option 2 may not even be an option, honestly. It may default to option 3 once they take a look.
So
Whether we weigh in or not doesn't seem to matter.
Sure.
But I want to articulate a position if we can. Does that make sense?
And from my understanding, you're saying if the reevaluation were to happen and it was determined the ROD was no longer valid and a new EIS were required, you would like that scope expanded to the Brush Creek Park and Ride?
I'd certainly like them to consider it.
Yeah.
However, I don't think we are going as far to say that in this. I would, just to reread sort of the last 2 whereases, whereas the ETA and ROD do not alleviate congestion at the roundabout, the FHA and CDOT should work with Public Works to reduce vehicular traffic in the roundabout. And then I would propose, per Greg's request, a sixth whereas the ETA and ROD do not alleviate congestion as far as down as the Brush Creek Park and Ride. The FHA and CDOT should work with Public Works to reduce vehicular traffic to the Brush Creek Park and Ride. Doesn't implicate them within the ROD or the EIS.
Are we making you nervous?
I'm having a bit of a hard time trying to split the hair here.
It's saying this doesn't do that, so they should work on this anyway.
Okay.
Not,
Yes. As
Is
in
how
a parallel
they're-
path.
yes,
That makes sense.
yes. Nothing that we're saying says you need to do this in the context of this. It says this is doing this and it's not alleviating that, and we still think you need to deal with
You still need to do this.
those problems.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Francie, any thoughts on the proposed amendments?
Not really. I would prefer that we didn't add these. But if it's what we have to do to get approval here, I will concede once again today.
Boy, oh boy, she's so amenable. Thank you,
So
Francie.
nice.
The compromising nature of government. So thank you for that, Francie. I appreciate that. Is there further discussion on these? Otherwise, I'll open public comment. Greg, go ahead.
I'd only say that I was probably going to be a no, and this gets me to yes.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and hear public comment on this. I know we have some folks in the room and then maybe online.
And I just want to note, I haven't captured the last potential whereas in this particular.
Should we
I did
craft
go
that?
ahead and put the draft up here, and I was not sure where Commissioner Woodruff would have liked these 5 and a potential number 6, whereas to land, I currently added it right before the last whereas, which I took some liberty doing that. And if
I'm
would
gonna
like to
hand you a
propose this-
paper with
sorry?
it. I'll hand you my paper that has what I wrote.
Okay,
Okay.
but for the purpose of public comment, this is what we have so far, I believe.
Why don't we flesh that out before we open public comment? Because
I was
I think
wondering
we're
if
on the
anybody wanted
verge.
to flesh out this last potential whereas before opening public comment.
I think Kelly's
I
doing
can't
that.
type as fast as you all can speak, so.
Yes, I'm almost done.
But you're pretty good at IT. We'll
I
keep
can
you
do
around.
some IT, but transcribing, I am not there yet.
I could have typed it and emailed it faster.
Probably.
It mirrors the 5th whereas, and just essentially replaces roundabout with Brush Creek. Park
Thanks
and
for
Ride.
doing that, Jeffrey. And Kelly, thank you for considering it.
Yes,
And Francie as well.
yes.
BCPNR is
Brush Creek
Park
Park
and
and
Ride.
Ride.
Park. Got it.
There's an acronym we haven't. Jeffrey's going to be throwing that
We
one
have
around.
moved away from calling it the intercept lot.
I
I'd
barely have. I
say.
still choked on that.
CDOT should work or WAK?
Yes, work with Public Works to reduce vehicular traffic to the Brush Creek Park and Ride.
Cooperative work is redundant.
All right. I think Rye's done, and I will open public comment and invite Tony to come on up. Hi.
May I?
Oh, yes, yes, Tony has a handout, and I asked her to wait until we were on this item to pass those out.
Are these 3 separate handouts, Tony? Or no, I see what you got going on here.
Thank you.
Three oriented for a full packages there.
Thank you.
You got it. Thank you.
Quite organized.
Thank you. Thanks for this.
And I'll give one to Andrew, do you already have a copy?
I believe I do.
Okay. Does anybody out there want one? Sure. Mr. Mason.
Whenever you're ready.
Sure, it's fascinating.
It probably is.
For the record, my name is Tony Kronberg, and I'd like to thank you very much for taking public comment today on your proposed resolution endorsing a reevaluation process of the preferred alternative from Main Street Aspen to Buttermilk Ski Area. The documents that I have given to you, I've given them to you because you don't always believe the facts that I bring before you. So this is, the information that I've given you is taken directly from the record of decision. I'm really disappointed that you may have predetermined the outcome before you took public comment based on some of the yays and nays today.
Thank you.
Concerning this issue. Last week, there's so much confusion and so much misunderstanding as to the process, and your resolution demonstrates it, that you don't understand the process that's needed. Last week, Rachel Richards decided in their retreat that she's instructed that Jacobs Engineering has got to put together a flow chart so that people understand what a reevaluation is, what an environmental impact study is, what they will achieve and what they don't achieve. I'm bringing this forward in the spirit of what the federal government has noticed about Aspen, Picken County, and Snowmass. And that's basically that we have a continued debate. Nobody can agree on anything, and they want us to work collectively. Right now, the city of Aspen is in they're in the very first stage of environmental impact study. That's where that survey comes into play and the interactive map. This resolution is doing exactly what the feds and the Colorado Department of Transportation don't want us to do. We're supposed to be working together. So the city of Aspen, they're in the very first stage of the pre-NEPA evaluation. They have a survey and an online interactive map that they've asked the community to fill out so they can figure out the purpose of why, which is what basically you're putting in your whereases, which is premature because you're not letting the experts do their job. But so far as the purpose, why do we need to do it? And the needs is, well, we need to go from Aspen all the way down to Brush Creek because there's so much congestion during the whole thing. One of the things that I wanted to point out to you, and it was brought up again today, the record of decision from the Aspen record of decision, and I put a map in here from the record of decision and the description of it. The highway component goes from downtown Ruby Park to Buttermilk Ski Area. It's designated on the map and in the written description. The transit part of it, which is the light rail, goes from Ruby Park down to Service Center Road. One of the goals that the city council put in their retreat package last week is that they really do want to go all the way down to Brush Creek. The Transportation Coalition for the 21st Century, they also think that we should include the airport, the lumberyard housing, the ABC, and Brush Creek. It's a given. Something's got to be done, either a reevaluation or an EIS or what's known as a supplemental EIS. If we extend the project limits, that requires a supplemental EIS or an environmental impact study. A reevaluation only covers what's in the Aspen record of decision. That's the most important part right there. We cannot look at from Buttermilk to the airport, ABC, all the way down to Brush Creek and the lumberyard housing because that's in the basalt record of decision. I have that in this packet for you. The language is right there. It says Buttermilk to basalt record of decision. I'm not making this up. And I just wish that I could somehow have you understand that what we need to do is we need to go with the city of Aspen. We need your time to make your recommendations is what's known as the scoping process. The very first thing that we have to do is decide, is it an EIS or is it a reevaluation? If we want to go all the way down to Brush Creek, we don't have a choice in the matter. We have to do an EIS or an SCIS. And lastly, I think that's it. But my goal in this whole thing is to pull everybody together on the same page. I don't want us to do what the federal government and CDOT has put into the record of decision, and I put the quote in there for you, that we have to work collectively. We can't make up our minds. There's a continued debate. And the fact that the city council is not going to have all their facts until June. So what's going to happen when they come out and they go, we need to do an EIS? I just really wish that you would work with the city of Aspen, work within the process, and understand that we have to make a choice, reevaluation or environmental impact study. Every evaluation only goes so far, and EIS does the whole corridor. But anyway, as you said, CDOT said it doesn't make any really difference what you do, because we're not going to pay attention to it anyway, just like the Transportation Coalition, because it's outside the step that we're in the process right now. The time for these comments, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, is in the scoping process once CDOT and the Fed say we can move ahead.
We don't engage in dialogue during public.
I'm sorry?
We don't engage in dialogue with staff during public comment, but I appreciate your
Right.
input.
And then I just wanted to say, on a side note, I wanted to thank Andrew very much because we've got Smith Hill Road and Lazy Glen coming forward, and we've had these discussions before. But anyway, I wanted to say thank you because it's really much appreciated. And if we could just all work together and not try to step on, to do anything before the time is right.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much. I
it.
appreciate it.
All right, other public comment. All right, Mr. Maple.
First of all, Tony, thank you for that information. I was super excited to find out where Service Center Road is. I've been scratching my head for the last meeting and this meeting, going, where the hell is Service Center Road? I thought I, knew my way around the valley fairly well, but missed that one. In any event, thank you for reconsidering this resolution. I urge you to approve this resolution. And I want to say that this is improving the entrance to Aspen is an urgent matter as the Castle Creek Bridge is deteriorating. We all need to be able to come and go to our community, and without a Castle Creek Bridge that is fully functional, our enjoyment of our valley will be severely impaired. So kicking that some sort of solution down the road is a poor idea. Contrary to the thoughts of some, moving forward with a reevaluation of the record of decision is a logical and reasonable process in looking at the entrance to Aspen as well as other aspects of congestion and traffic in our valley. The record of reevaluation will provide critical data and insight that, if necessary, could be used for moving forward with a new EIS. They are not at all mutually exclusive. This is absolutely the logical approach to gather data, I believe, at somebody else's expense, rather than trying to come up with an EIS. As I conveyed to you all last week, or 2 weeks ago, CDOT has indicated that it is likely that an EIS process could easily take 6 years and $3 or $4 million. So not moving forward with a logical next step in hopes that somehow or another this challenging community might somehow or another be able to come up with a consensus and then present something to a federal government that has been stripped of its ability to formulate and participate in an environmental impact statement is really the same as doing nothing and kicking the can down the road. So I'm asking you to move forward with the next logical step. It doesn't preclude any other steps, and certainly in addition to the record of or reevaluation of the record of decision, I certainly encourage the county commissioners to be engaged in any and all attempts at reviewing and looking at our at traffic in our valley and how can we improve it. But don't kick the can down the road. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, is there any additional comment in public or online? If anyone's online who wishes to comment, please raise your hand.
We have a bot and 2 employees.
Okay. Not seeing any, I will bring it back to the board for further discussion or a motion. Greg.
I just wanted to thank the commenters. Mike, you were very clear with your summation, and I agree with that. And I wanted to say it's about the quality of life in the entire community, the quality of life, the quality of the resort. All these suffer when we have gridlock, and you know, we could easily become a mediocre second-rate destination, and through this one giant mess alone. And that's heartbreaking for me, and I do want to do everything I can to help us move it forward, and clearly working with the city and everyone else is absolutely necessary to get to a solution. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to moving it forward.
Thanks, Greg. Francie?
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, I just wanted to explain that the reason I'm not thrilled about these resolutions is I am concerned about them altering the extent of the ROD. So I just wanted to explain that for the public.
Okay, thank you. Jeffrey?
Echoing Greg's comments, I think in order to be a world-class resort, we need to have world-class transportation system. Everything that we've added to the resolution really, again, pulls directly from the 2007 report. So it's not conflating or contradicting what was in the original record of decision, Francie. It's really adding to that sort of body of knowledge that came out through the HDR engineering report and reflects where we are as a community today.
Okay, well, I just hope when the CDOT looks at it, if indeed they look at it, they see it that way.
Francie, do you wish to propose any clarifications?
No, I'm okay. Thank you, Kelly.
Okay.
And Francie, I am amenable if there was something that is irking you. I would be happy to strike, to be honest. This was, I appreciate the board coming together through this resolution. And again, this was not a Jeffrey proposes. This was really based on, there's roughly 350 pages in the engineering report that is what's appearing on the screen in front of you.
Okay, let me just look at it again. Well, I would say that the statement that it doesn't reduce traffic to 1993-94 traffic levels. Well, first of all, I thought we were aiming at 98 traffic levels, but you probably looked it up, so you're probably right. And I don't think that not reducing them to that level is a reason not to move forward. So I'm a little concerned about putting that in there. But
yeah, again, I'm sorry if I could answer that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that statement actually comes directly from the HDR report, which is looking at both the transportation systems as well as any improvement, including light rail. So that's the aspiration, was to return to the 1993-94 traffic levels. So again, it's not a Jeffrey said, it's clearly just directly lifted from the engineering report.
From when?
2007 was the engineering report.
Greg?
Yeah.
I was just going to say.
It's fine. Let's just move on.
I was going to say the same. Yeah, there are no surprises in there.
Yeah.
Andrew, do you have any?
Do you regret bringing this to us now?
No, no,
Do you look at
absolutely
this
not.
and see is there contradiction here that you would call out for us to consider?
I think a lot of these whereas are, pointing out maybe some qualitative things of the ROD that may not be able to be changed with a reevaluation. Whether or not that's worthy to raise in the resolution here is to the board's discretion, but, I think, a lot of these things, traffic levels to 1993-94 levels, you can't necessarily change those with infrastructure. You can change them with other policy decisions, which I won't get into in this forum. And that's just something that, catches my attention.
Thank you for that.
That's fair.
And it's just a maybe point of clarification. Federal Highways Administrations like to go by FHWA generally.
I would change that if the board, well, I think that's just a edit. That
Yeah,
probably makes sense.
Consult legal.
How about if we just leave out that one about the 93, 94 traffic and move on without it?
That's the record of decision. You have to.
Is that acceptable?
I would take that as a friendly.
Very friendly.
Is that acceptable to you?
Sure.
So strike this first one.
Yes, please.
Please.
Thank you, guys.
Likewise.
Is there further discussion? Yes, Jeffrey?
Will you take a motion?
I will. Yes, please, and then I'll make my own comments. Go ahead.
So I'd like to make a resolution to approve the Board of County Commissioners of Pitkin County, Colorado, endorsing the reevaluation of the entrance to Aspen record of decision and its supporting environmental impact statement,
I'll
as
second
amended
your-
on the screen by Rye.
I'll second your motion for the resolution.
Okay, any further discussion? I'll just say, I appreciate all the comments that were brought to us earlier this month as well as today. And, and Tony, I've listened to you and I've thought logically about what you've proposed. I think if the city has been in a posture of fortitude relative to their position, then perhaps this resolution would seem less important to me, but I think that this is also an encouragement to them for aligning with all of the work that the ROD laid out and what I think continues to be the correct path forward. I'm not seeing that fortitude from the city, and so I hope that our position may encourage them in that direction and may encourage them in alignment with what the voters decided earlier this year. So I think it is important for us to do this. I also heard, information that I have heard in the past, but was just sort of reaffirmed at the EOTC meeting relative to the authorities of decision-making residing with CDOT and the FHWA, and that, we as a board have opportunity to communicate to them what we think is the right path, and that is what this resolution, I hope, does, and reaffirms again that, the record of decision is a very solid, good body of work that remains very relevant and appropriate to pursue in 2025. So with that, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, thank you all. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Okay, we are moving on to land use because we have a short meeting today. So, would anyone like a few-minute break while our land use
It is a couple
team
minutes, yeah.
sets up? All right, let's take 10 minutes. We'll start at 1:30. right, welcome back, everyone, to the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners regular session on Wednesday, May 28th. We are starting our land use agenda. We have one item today. This is a public hearing on Mainland Ranch P1 LLC and Mainland Ranch P4 LLC, an activity envelope and site plan review for stream restoration projects. This is a one-read public hearing. Okay. So I will turn it over to staff to start our presentation. Tammy?
Thanks, Kelly. So I am going to start in and give a pretty brief or general overview of the whole project, give some background information and context. And then I'm going to hand it over to Jason Janes, who's representing the applicant, to dive into some of the extensive engineering reports and work that's been done and what's being proposed with the details of the restoration work. And then I'll follow up with the code sections that the board needs to consider. So just jumping in right away, the applicant for this item is the Mainland Ranch P1 LLC and Mainland Ranch P4 LLC. The subject property is located at on parcel 1 and parcel 4 of the Flying Dog Ranch subdivision exemption. So it's also known as the Four Sons Ranch, which is comprised of 4 parcels, all owned by the same owner, and it was previously known as the Flying Dog Ranch. So the 2 subject parcels are shown on the screen, highlighted in blue. Parcel 1 is just north of Woody Creek Road. So here we have Woody Creek Road. Here's parcel 1. Parcel 4 is just to the south of Woody Creek Road here. So parcels 2 and 3 are on the upper mesas, and they are not part of this application. The zoning for these parcels is RS20. Parcel 1 contains approximately 62.82 acres, while parcel 4 contains 88.35 acres. Some recent land use approvals that have occurred are the 2008 BoCC approval of the 1041 hazard review, conceptual submission, special review, and DMQS exemption. There was a historic designations and a takings remediation with that. And in conjunction with that approval, there was also an agricultural and wildlife conservation easement that was granted on parcel 4 to the benefit of AVLT and the BoCC. And then recently in 2022, the board approved a 1041 hazard review amendment, an activity envelope and site plan review in order to realign the access to parcel 4 through parcel 1 instead of connecting directly to Woody Creek Road. And then most recently, there's been an administrative decision which has approved a lot of redevelopment on the site, which includes a lot of structures and some pretty extensive agricultural water systems and improvements to ponds and that irrigation system. And so currently there's a lot of activity on parcel 1 associated with those improvements. There's been numerous permits that have been issued and are currently underway. So here's some pictures of just those some of that pond work. This is an interesting structure in the middle there. That's a dilapidated indoor tennis court. So there's a lot going on right now. All this work is not associated with what's being proposed in front of you right now. So what is being proposed is activity envelope and site plan review approval to restore the portions of Collins Creek and Woody Creek which flow through the 2 parcels. So highlighted in yellow on the screen and blue is Collins Creek. As you can see, this is parcel 1, and then it intersects with Woody Creek highlighted in green here on parcel 4. I'll just really quickly go through existing conditions because I'm sure Jason's gonna talk about this more, but there's a lot of various habitats that occur on these parcels, including riparian shrublands, aspen, meadows, agricultural grasslands, and obviously the two main hydrological features on these parcels are Collins Creek and Woody Creek. They've both been manipulated to varying degrees on both these parcels, which have limited the structural and hydrologic diversity. These systems are also associated with a lot of wetlands, which also exist in varying conditions. So the wetlands have been impacted mainly by previous cattle grazing, and they have been disconnected from the stream channel. So you can see here, I think this is Collins Creek and the channelization that's occurring there. Collins Creek, here's some images of that, what's going on there. The upper portion of Collins Creek has totally been realigned from its historic alignment. The conditions existing there, like I said, are channelization, abundance of noxious weeds, a lot of erosion, and some of it you can see over on the right side here, some past efforts to control that erosion, and those issues have been addressed by putting some tires and cars there to hold that bank back. Woody Creek exists in a little bit better condition than the Collins Creek. It is surrounded on these parcels by the agricultural uses, but it has been degraded by these uses from things such as the fencing, water diversion, bridges, and road infrastructure. There's also been nutrient inputs from cattle grazing, fertilizer, and you can see that the bank erosion is prevalent here. So you can kind of categorize the work being proposed in 3 different sections, highlighted in the various colors here on the map. The yellow is the upper reach of Collins Creek, where total reconstruction of that alignment is going to be proposed in order to get it back to that historic alignment, as well as there's going to be, they've incorporated a debris flow structure in with that to address some of the potential alluvial flooding. The blue section is the lower reach of Collins Creek, which will have a little bit less manipulation and restoration, but it will have some channel reconstruction and bed manipulation. And then the green section is Woody Creek, where the least amount of work is being proposed because it is in a little bit better shape, but there is some bed modification and channel reconstruction there as well. The overreaching goals are to enhance aquatic, wetland, and riparian ecological and biological habitats. Like I said, return Collins Creek to its alignment, as well as convey some of the potential clear water and alluvial debris flows that could occur. There's also bank stabilization and erosion control, and lastly, reconnecting these features to the floodplain. I think I might skip over some of these implementation strategies because I'm sure you guys are going to cover that. But it's, obviously planting native plants, using native materials to reinforce those banks. Let's skip some of this. And then just staff did refer this application to the attorney, the planning engineer, who did provide numerous comments. One of those comments was that he'd like to have a construction management plan be provided for the board to consider. So the applicant has provided that conceptual plan to you today, and I'm sure he'll cover it. But a more detailed plan would obviously be reviewed and approved at permit. Colorado Geologic Survey also reviewed the application, and specifically some of those engineering reports, and in general agreed with the reports and the findings in those reports. The Woody Creek Caucus also reviewed the application and more or less gave their approval. Some of their comments or more associated with the ongoing work, separate from this application. And then ABLT, in coordination with our Open Space and Trails Department, also reviewed the application and provided a letter of approval, which was in the packet. And with that letter, there were lots of conditions that they provided, which staff did include in the draft resolution. So with that, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jason to present the dive deep into what's being proposed and what they found in all the various reports that were done.
Thank you very much, Tammy.
Yeah.
For the record, Jason Janes with DHM Design, landscape architect and planner. And to Tammy's point, we've studied this kind of two reaches of creek at a very, very high level, and there's been a huge amount of coordination. And we have a lot of detailed technical documentation. We're going to go over that kind of at a relatively high level today, but we have that with us. If there's anything that you want to ask questions about or interrupt us while we're presenting, or go back and look as we're having discussion, we can bring those up on the screen and talk a little bit more about that level of detail. And we'll get into some of that, but we're going to try to hit kind of the high points and make sure we cover everything, and then be available to go back and kind of talk through it. So while I get my screen set up, I'm going to hand it over to Gavin to kind of introduce us and the team.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Shared. Yep.
Gavin Brook with Spring Point Group. I'm the owner's representative for Mainland Ranch parcels 1 through 4. And Jason, who you've met, and then Ryan Graves, the owner of Mainland Ranch, is also on the Zoom call, and he will introduce himself a little bit later. In a quick high-level review, thank you, Tammy, for you covered about half of what I was going to cover, so I'm going to try and make it quick and painless, as I promised Mr. Pushman. We did assemble an excellent...
He's not the chair.
But I didn't get the chance to
Just kidding.
make that promise to you in the lobby.
No,
so.
universally like quick and painless.
Oh, okay. I got it. Fair enough. If you would prefer I drag it out, I can.
Okay. We do that very well on our own, so thank you.
We did assemble a wonderful team for this. We had Right Water Engineering as our primary water engineer, Scott Schreiber with Right Water. I know that he has presented to you guys before. He's the engineer for the streams and fisheries restoration. And then we also brought in Urbani Fisheries out of Bozeman, Montana, who is one of the premier fisheries and stream rehabilitation companies and consultants in the U.S. They also are ridiculously charming and actually show up and do the work themselves. So to see Joe Urbani at 75 years old caring enough to still be out there telling the excavator how to build the pools and streams is amazing. We can move to context slides. I think you were going to cover a few of these because these are mostly you, Jason.
Yeah, and I think Tammy largely covered it. I would assume most of you all know pretty specifically and clearly where the property is, with a section of Collins Creek running through parcel 1 and into parcel 4, and then and that's about 4,000 feet long, and a section of about 1,600 linear feet of Woody Creek running through parcel 4. And also of note is the proximity of Four Sons Ranch to the National Forest boundary. That east property boundary of parcel 2 up on the mesa connects directly to Forest Service land. We've had significant consultation with Colorado Parks and Wildlife on a number of fronts, including this restoration project. And just to set the stage a little bit, and to clarify, Tammy talked about parcel 1 and parcel 4. This is just an illustrative map. The entire property, some of parcel 4 that runs up onto the hillside, that adjoins Starwood is not included on this map. But what's highlighted right now in the middle as parcel 1 is where you see most of the historic development and most of the current and new development. The new home building, irrigation reservoirs, existing ranch infrastructure is mostly on parcel 1 and then up on the top of parcel 4. And parcel 1 is kind of a lower valley portion with some steep hillsides running up on either side. Then
on this slide, oh, go ahead.
I'll go back. if I can.
On this slide, it's noteworthy that parcel 4 is under conservation easement, as is parcel 3. So the upper left corner is under conservation easement with AVLT and BoCC as well. So half of the property essentially is currently under conservation easement.
And as we kind of page through that, parcel 2 is up on what we would call the East Mesa. So it's elevated above the valley floor, large open pasture and meadows there, and then Gamble Oak and Serviceberry kind of bleeding into that Forest Service land. That currently has driveway access up to it and then some drainage infrastructure up on it, but is otherwise undeveloped. Parcel 3, as Gavin said, is under a conservation easement. That's up on the West Mesa, also elevated up above the valley floor. That has the potential for an ag envelope on it, but currently there is no development on that. There's plans for an automated ag scale irrigation system from some of the storage that's in place now, again, held under conservation easement. I think it's also worth noting that since the current owners purchased the property, the conservation easement, some of the details of the conservation easement have been employed kind of at a higher level. There was kind of ongoing and then deferred maintenance on the property. And so things like taking down barbed wire fence and putting up the smooth wire fence and making sure that the property really is adhering to the requirements of the conservation easement has been a priority since day one. Oops. And then parcel 4, which is obviously really important, is down on the valley floor with Woody Creek running through it. That has an activity envelope for ag buildings. There is currently a barn under construction, and there's recently been a pole barn for equipment storage. There's also approval for a hay shed on that activity envelope, which is right up against Woody Creek, and then the rest is active pasture and then the wetlands complex of Woody Creek. And I'm going to hand it back over to Gavin to talk a little bit about just the overall ranch history and character of the property.
So these are mostly photos of parcel 4. So this is where the majority of the development is concentrated. Everybody would recognize the view on the right there. That's the historic Woody Creek Road going past the historic cabin and barn. The history of the property, it's along Collins Creek. It was owned by the Collins family initially. Most recently, it was owned by George and Patty Stranahan. It was the Flying Dog Ranch. They achieved a 15-year vested right approval, which the Graves purchased with 1 year remaining. And so there was already some significant approvals in place. They instituted a number of building permits and have then begun construction on all of those. We have 2 residences under construction on parcel 1 and 2 ag buildings currently under construction on parcel 1 and 2 ag buildings under construction on parcel 4. Maybe the next slide. So the property is recovering from a century of manipulation of this creek, some for aesthetic reasons, and these are mostly aesthetic. The creek had been diverted to run closer to the original lodge house. It would have been diverted to run to some ponds that it has now been returned to its main channel. It also has a lot of irrigation infrastructure or aged irrigation infrastructure that is in all of it, and some of those are kind of throwback, like tires bracing the bank and abandoned ditch diversions, flumes that have been taken out of commission. So we've been in the process of restoring those. We've restored measuring devices, diversion points for the irrigation. We've installed a pressurized irrigation system. The distribution piping up in the fields is yet to be installed, but the infrastructure for that has been installed. I think at this time I'd love to have Ryan Graves is on Zoom, I believe, and I'd love to have him introduce himself and a little bit of his own history of the property. Thanks. Ryan, are you?
Can you go ahead and speak? Great, we can hear you.
Awesome.
All right. Do I need to worry about my visuals here, or should I just keep rolling?
I think you can keep rolling.
Okay, how's everyone doing today? Thanks for letting me join. I appreciate the chance. Yeah, I guess to just introduce myself, my wife Molly and I have 4 boys, thus maybe the obvious Four Sons Ranch, although this is Sons SUNS. And we bought the ranch back in 21 after spending most of the summer in Aspen but kind of between Aspen and Carbondale at the AVR there. We just kind of quickly fell in love with the valley and then stumbled across this property pretty fortuitously and thought it was kind of incredible land to be available. And so we as soon as we digested the reality of the speed of how quickly we'd have to move given the vested rights, it's kind of a race from day one. But we've tried to be consistent with what we heard from Patty, who we got to know pretty well, and then Jesse and Jill Steinler, who we became very close with over the course of that next couple of years, and just processed a lot of I guess what you would call the culture of Woody Creek, and of George, basically, and some of that vision. And it aligned a lot with how we operate. We basically wanted to build a place for our family to aggregate family and friends, and quickly started meeting a lot of folks in Woody Creek. We from a development from an ag perspective, we kind of took the approach from day zero that we wanted to go as healthy as possible. There was obviously a ton of overgrowth with 15 years or so of basically unattended, unmanicured, on anything on that property, and as we were looking at how we were gonna manage it, there's obviously tons of options for non-native plants and management, and there was the pesticide option and so forth. We ended up bringing in like 1,300 goats, and with which was an adventure for our boys, and also we felt good about the path. And now that we have animals, we have 10 Highlands cattle you'll probably see if you drive by on the ranch, and we have horses and our own goats and pigs, and we're having a blast. But we've kind of taken that approach that the health for our family and for the land is kind of paramount. And ultimately, it's a place for adventures and memories. And from a restoration perspective, obviously, the water is very important. It's important everywhere, but it's especially important to us. We are full time on the island of Kauai, and I grew up near the water in San Diego, and so we love being in the mountains, but we also love water. And when it's not frozen, it's a key element of what that property offers and why it became obviously so special to us as quickly as it did. And so yeah, that's kind of been our focus, is let's bring it back to its prime state. It hasn't been an inexpensive endeavor, but it's been worth every dollar of investment. We should be able to inhabit some of the residents that Gavin talked about come next summer, hopefully. I never know about those timelines, but mid to late summer next year. So we're excited to spend a pretty significant amount of time as soon as we have beds. So I'm happy to address any questions or if there are any. But given I can't see everybody, and I'll shut up now. But happy to stay involved in the conversation, however you guys think is best. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Why don't we continue on with the presentation, and then we'll check in with board questions.
Wonderful. We have about halfway through the slides. We wanted to talk a little bit about the current approvals, and in the packet and in Tammy's memo, there's an entire 8.5 by 11 page that is dedicated to all of the land use approvals and the permits associated with the project. And that a lot of that has to do with exactly what Ryan was talking about, that 10 or 15 years of activity on the ranch that needed to be kind of cleaned up and made to fit into the current regulations. And so there are existing activity envelopes and there are existing activity envelope and site plan approvals in place. The most current one that is in process, I believe, still has to do with that 2008 approval that organized and made legal some of the pre-existing structures, some of the stream setback issues, those existing conditions that then also related to the dedication of the conservation easement. And now we've been going back through and making sure that all of that recorded documentation is in line with the current land use codes. And so this will have its own activity envelope and site plan. And when we talk a little bit about construction management, you'll see that the activity envelopes are very, very specific to detailed study of what we need to do to work in the creek. So that's the primary kind of approval vehicle that we're talking about today. And then we will ultimately be ready to turn around quickly and submit an earth moving permit to implement that work. It's also important to note that there are existing U.S. Army Corps nationwide permits in place on the property now. One is a notification and one is an exemption, because some areas of wetlands were disturbed for the irrigation storage ponds. Those received an ag exemption, and that's why that work has been able to go forward. And then in a couple of other places, and I'll jump down to the next slide, where you see the yellow boxes over the illustrative plan are all areas where there was specific technical work that was required in the vicinity of the stream. And so that may be replacing culverts that were either failing or were not large enough to pass flood or debris, running new infrastructure, so all new septic systems up there, new power, those things in certain places needed to cross the stream. And in a couple of places, making the roads meet county standards required some interventions in proximity to the stream. And so those are the places where we have the current Army Corps permits in place that have allowed the infrastructure and the construction work to be permitted to date. And the nationwide 27 is specific to the overall habitat improvement of Collins Creek and Woody Creek stream corridors.
And it's worth noting that about half of those are completed already. We did we replaced Woody Creek Road over Collins Creek, so that was already done. There's irrigation diversion work has already been done. Infrastructure work has already been done. There's a transportation crossing that's underway now and 2 more to come. So those are nearly complete and would be wrapped up this summer.
Tammy also covered the referral agencies that have had an opportunity to look at the project. And not only were the land use and the Army Corps application referred to a number of agencies, representatives from each of those departments or agencies have all been on the site, some several times, and toured with the project team to evaluate the site conditions and understand the proposal much more clearly from the ground. And so the 2 primary vehicles for those approvals have been Pickens County, then referring out to Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and then the internal departments, as well as Aspen Valley Land Trust and the Woody Creek Caucus. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers also referred the nationwide 27, the habitat improvement permit, to Colorado Parks and Wildlife and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And so we've received comments, those were in the packet, for things like control of construction season. And I guess the larger point, we can talk about that a little bit later, is if there's an agency that regulates moving water, wetlands, habitat in our region, they have been a participant in this project and have likely set foot on the property to walk the project with us.
Perhaps even more importantly, we met directly with the Woody Creek Caucus twice, the District Planning Commission once, and then the caucus itself, and tried to address other concerns that they had about tracking mud onto Woody Creek Road and challenges with crossing during the road replacement when we were down to 1 lane and a couple of things like that. But we ended up with their blessing on this work.
And one of the reasons that the conditions of approval that we received for additional information and studies and management plans was very easy for us to say yes and just move forward, is much of that information has been developed for other applications or as just a part of the necessary management of the ranch. So we're just kind of splashing this up on the screen. These are all technical reports that have been done to evaluate the health of the stream system, to provide management recommendations for both agriculture and weed management on the property. We've delineated and evaluated the quality and the content in the area of the wetlands. So any number of these reports, and we have, 1,000 pages, a couple thousand pages of technical studies that have all been done on top of the design documentation, or I guess behind and supporting the design documentation that's been done. I think you were going to talk a little bit about goals.
So I think There are a couple of goals in this. One is we have some pragmatic goals of taking existing earth-moving permit approvals and making them more ecologically sound. So currently there is a little bit of berming, 200 feet or so of berming to protect residences up at the upper end that's approved in the current earth-moving permit. And so the work at the upper end of Collins Creek helps put that back in its channel and takes the necessity of those berms away and does a bit of sort of floodplain reintegration of the existing creek. It had been diverted up onto the house sites for aesthetic reasons, and so it's returning that water to the main channel. We also moved the point of irrigation diversion because we went from flood irrigation on the upper mesas to pressurized irrigation. So a fair amount of that. Then there are the goals of ecological uplift. So these are a couple of successful projects by the Urbani Fisheries Group. This is post their restoration work. And you can see the obvious sort of pool and riffle of a natural stream habitat. You can see how the vegetation and the banks are laid back. There's variety in the way that those creeks behave. Currently, Collins Creek is about somewhere between 18 inches and 3 feet wide and generally a channel that's incised pretty deeply. There are a few places where it's really a treasure and it's in its sort of natural condition, but for the majority of the ranch it's been treated mostly as an irrigation diversion. So I think maybe looking next at the stream corridors and characteristics, history of the deferred maintenance there. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, related directly to what Gavin was just saying about the conditions, particularly along Collins Creek, even though it runs down the floor of Parcel 1, which is flat in the characteristics of the ranch itself, it's actually quite steep as a stream. And so where it has been diverted and effectively straight-lined kind of down the hill, we have incised characteristics, so it's down cut, and so Gavin's talked about it being 18 inches to 3 feet wide. It's often 18 inches to 3 feet deep as well, where it only carries generally a small amount of water. And so we see these very straight stream characteristics, which then, as it starts to erode down, Gavin also talked about the slope layback. We don't have the ability to absorb flood flows or debris flows by having some floodplain connectivity. And then you also you get some of that riparian vegetation. So sometimes it looks very natural, but you don't have the wetland vegetation along the fringe of the ordinary high water line. And because of those things, as well as that unnatural characteristic of running straight down a steep slope, you also get really consistent grades, both in the bed itself as well as the overall slope. And so you don't have the variety that creates the aquatic habitat for the macroinvertebrates and fish that also support the overall habitat characteristics and uplift of the stream corridor. And so where we see very even bed grading, where we see a lack of those kind of pools and change in grade, that's places we see for opportunities for improvement. And then there's obviously the interventions that would be more of kind of insults to the stream corridor itself, whether it's erosion or infrastructure that has failed in some places or not been maintained, or unnatural elements that have been placed into the corridor. So we also see down on Woody Creek itself, Tammy had that far right image up in her report as well. That's one location on Woody Creek where we see an opportunity for some stream layback. There's been a history of, previously a history of open access from livestock down into the stream corridor. There are some of the water rights require that some of the water is used for agricultural uses, including livestock watering. And what we've been looking at with Jared, the ranch manager, who's been on the property now since Ryan and Molly have had it, and fencing is going up to create exclusion zones and direct management. So instead of this kind of open free-for-all into those areas, it's going to be directly managed in a regenerative way with the cattle and other livestock that are on the property. And of course, you see any number of kind of unnatural or failing pieces of infrastructure. One of the reasons we included the second image from the left that shows what kind of looks like a pretty little waterfall is some of the components of the steeper grades of the stream also prohibit fish passage. And so in the technical design and in the habitat design, working directly with Urbani Fisheries, we looked at ways to make sure that where we have to have cascades or stepping in the stream corridor, that we are creating pools that allow the fish to jump from one to the next, that we're not creating steps that are too big or velocities that are too high for fish to pass. So that gets us into just a couple of snapshots of the technical documents, and we won't go into these in great detail. We thought this was a really good example of the level of engineering that's gone into this natural stream channel design. This is actually up in the area where the mud and debris flow mitigation channel has been designed. And so the purple area on your screen is the limit of excavation that's required to create that narrow meandering channel that's down in the bottom. And that is so wide in that location because of the requirements of the engineering study. And that's a place that we saw an opportunity to go back and naturalize the bank grading. And instead of straight grading that, what would be basically a big drainage ditch down the hill, create those natural characteristics. So we look at a meandering channel and variation in the slope, as well as opportunities for floodplain connectivity. So this has been graded out very specifically with locations of pools, riffles, runs. Any of the structures that would be in the channel will be natural features. Urbani really likes to salvage when there's excavation going on the property, big wads of roots from trees or chewed up logs, and those end up getting used as structures either to support against erosion or just to create that natural habitat, because there are places where things like an undercut bank is actually a healthy stream. And so what we're looking for at the end of the day within this debris flow channel is a healthy, functioning, evolving, natural stream. One level deeper in that detailed study, this is a snapshot, and I wouldn't imagine that anybody would be able to understand what this is trying to convey, other than that over the top of the engineering drawings is the restoration plan. And so this indicates the native vegetation that exists in influence of groundwater in the riparian zone in the banks, and then as upland areas. And the work areas are the dashed lines that are identified all the way around each of these. This is actually at the confluence of Collins and Woody Creek. And I'll talk just a little bit about the difference in approach to interventions in Collins Creek and Woody Creek because of their different characteristics. But it does show one section of very steep, very eroded Collins Creek that will be completely rebuilt as it approaches the confluence with Woody Creek. And then in a couple of other areas, what's running kind of top to bottom on the left-hand side of your screen are little bubbles of intervention where there won't be any changes to the banks at all. It's just going into the bed, the stream bed with a machine and digging a pool and building a point bar and then backing the machine back out. And that is controlled at a very high level of study by this component of the construction management plan. So there will be a construction management plan. We provided an outline with some specific language from the various land use applications or the various permit applications, as well as feedback from referral agencies about how to manage construction on the property. A lot of it has to do with spawning habitat, and a lot of it has to do with controlling turbidity. So erosion, suspended soil in the water flowing downstream. And so there are time of year limitations associated with the construction. There are also durations. So a good example of the construction management for that is at a point 100 feet downstream of the construction site, if there continues to be visible turbidity in the water, then excavation stops until clear water flows again, and then excavation can resume. And it doesn't mean that no turbidity will pass through the stream corridor, but it just means that excavation is not going to cause a muddy stream to run all day long. And so what that looks like in practice is oftentimes the excavator is working for 5 to 10 minutes at a time if they're doing particularly bank work and generating turbidity in the stream bed, and then waiting for 10 to 20 minutes for that to clear, and then working for 5 to 10 minutes, and then waiting for 20 minutes. That's a very common practice even in large streams and large rivers. What's shown in purple on your screen here is areas that are affected by machine work. And so running right to left on the screen, and kind of right in the middle of the screen, is that full reconstruction of a section of eroded Collins Creek. And then down below is the more intermittent intervention along Woody Creek. And this includes a tracked excavator. So we have a specific model of tracked excavator that we've worked with the Urbani team to identify how long it can reach. And the edge of that purple zone is the edge of where the boom and the bucket can reach and do work. And so anything that happens beyond that, in some cases we have work shown beyond these excavator limits, that would be handwork. And so it would be small manipulation. When you're doing manual labor in the stream, digging a 3-foot deep pool is basically impossible. And so that's kind of small manipulations within the stream channel and effectively no impact on the banks or on the channel bottom itself. And so that is helping us to understand exactly where the machine is going to go in, where the machine is going to be able to track in the stream corridor, and then how far it's going to be able to reach to do the work and accomplish the goals that are specific to each of those locations. And then the green lines show where the equipment is allowed to track to get in and out and move its way kind of up and down the corridor. Very, very detailed. We have this for every single reach of the Stream Improvements Project. And so this is what it starts to look like in practice. Gavin had a couple of pictures of Urbani's work of completed projects. This is basically, and it's oversimplifying it certainly, but we wanted to illustrate a little bit of what this might look like in the field and specific to this project. So going from the lightest touch of machine work, this is looking down Woody Creek. You can see it's largely a relatively healthy corridor. It has pretty even grading across the bottom of the channel, so there's not much variety in that channel habitat. So this is an opportunity for us to go in where some vegetation management is necessary to open up the access for both people, but also wildlife to be able to get to the creek. This very, very overgrown kind of existing thicket of willow. And the willow will be trimmed back to the ground, but not dug out. So that will regenerate and it will be managed over time. So we have a management prescription for that. But that creates a location for the machine to come into the stream. In this imaginary scenario, it's coming in where that red line is, and then working its way up. And on the right-hand side where the teal blue is, it would dig that pool out a little bit deeper underneath those overhanging willows to create a pocket. And any cobble that comes out of that would go over in the blue dashed line area to build a new cobble bar. And so then you get that bed variation in the stream channel. Then the machine walks back to where it came from and walks back out of the stream and then moves its way on its construction access line. So that's with the machine, but still a very light touch and intermittent interventions in the corridor. The next one is a higher level of impact. This is a view of Collins Creek where it's very deeply incised down into a steep channel and has some eroded banks. So on the left-hand side in the yellow, that bank would actually be laid back until we caught up with some flatter grades, and riparian and wetland vegetation will be installed there. The machine would then be able to dig a pool off to the side, in this particular case enlarging the width of the stream a little bit, and then digging a continuous thalweg. And so where we have those really flat, shallow waters, and you don't have a continuous kind of low flow channel, basically, is how you can imagine a thalweg being. You lose some of that habitat connectivity. And then it kind of what we would consider the most extreme example, this is where Collins Creek was turned into a ditch that ran through a turf lawn. So the turf is all being removed, that's all being revegetated. This is an area where, without doing a lot of damage to existing native vegetation, we can lay that grade way back and create a wide floodplain that in a decent runoff year is going to get wet and is going to have wetland and riparian vegetation, and then resurfacing the stream through while trying to manage, maintain, preserve as much of the existing healthy vegetation on the opposite bank side as possible. So that we would consider that to be full reconstruction. And in this particular case, it was functioning as a drainage ditch. It's the old original alignment of Collins Creek, but almost all of the water has been diverted into an irrigation ditch in this particular location previously. So this is kind of the end of the discussion about what we're trying to do. We wanted to finish with, for the Army Corps permit, one of the requirements that they have when you're doing a habitat project is that you identify locations in your region or in your local area that say this is what we think this should look like. This is the right, so we have stream analogs. And so we've identified here in this map a number of local examples of healthy, functioning, naturally evolving stream corridors. And this went into our application. This is what we'll be held to by the Army Corps during the monitoring period after the fact. And I think it also just starts to show from an aerial view, this is what the end result is meant to look like. Is our goal is to make it as clear as possible that nobody was ever there once it's grown in and restored and kind of functioning as a healthy stream. So we have a couple of pages of that. The level of due diligence, the level of engineering study, the number of times this entire project team has walked the full corridor with GPS units marking this is the specific location for a pool, this is the specific location for a bank layback, and then working with the technical engineering of Right Water engineers is it's a pretty astounding level of thinking and work and planning that's gone into this, as well as the coordination and in a lot of cases the collaboration with some of the oversight agencies to really make this project be a genuine restoration for Ryan and Molly. And that's really that overall collaboration of the project team, the support of the owners, and then the engagement with these oversight agencies is what brings us here today with the request for approval of the activity envelope and site plan so that we can move forward to building permit. Gavin, what did I miss?
I've got nothing to add. Good job.
Went on and on. All right.
Let's go to board questions.
Thank you.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Jeffrey.
Not a lot of mention of wildlife, but a little bit in the package.
Red light's on.
So two items I'd love for you to touch on. One is, given the size and the scope of the parcel, I'd love to hear what you're doing in terms of, I guess, three parts. So wildfire resistance, introduction of new plantings, how do we get back to native? So that's sort of one bucket. And the second one, again, I think you were light on the wildlife, and Lisa's here, so we have to ask about the B word. Yeah.
That's great. I'm glad you asked, and it is a extremely important part of the project that because the streams are kind of the central focus of the overall habitat that's being created here, it's what we talk about the most, and sometimes we end up talking about the fish the most. So there's a number of things on the regulatory oversight as well as that coordination of what's the right thing to do on the property. We've spoken with CPW quite a bit, and so we have had an aquatic biologist and a terrestrial biologist, as well as the wildlife manager for our region for CPW, provide feedback on the overall management for wildlife. And so some of the things the vegetation management is intended to do, like some of the thinning of there's overgrown kind of a common species like a monoculture down in the willow zone, and they're all very similar age class. By going in and masticating those down, basically cutting them down to the ground and creating corridors, we create access opportunities, we create additional cover opportunities, and we also create that variability in sun and shade, whether it's for terrestrial wildlife or in the stream habitat. And there's also been a number of active vegetation management practices on the property to date. And so we have a vegetation management plan for the whole ranch, and that does include things like mastication, so grinding removal without surface damage of over-aged oak stands. So there's decadent oak stands up there that are like a massive wildfire fuel. So that creates some fuel breaks. It also creates some more of those wildlife corridors, and it creates regeneration in that habitat where it's just kind of been stagnant and in some cases just kind of dying out. Regardless of any of those management plans, every species of plant that's going to be used in this restoration project is a native plant species that is specific to the ecology to which it will be planted. In most cases, plants that you would already see on the property. And in many cases, there's already been a significant amount of harvesting of willow root balls and then replanting, where we may have already had to do a stream crossing for a culvert, pulling willow root balls out, setting them aside, putting the culvert in, and then putting those root balls back in the bank, and then you just get this big flush once they get some water on their feet. There's also harvesting of willow whips and dogwood whips and things like that we can really do so that even the genetics of the plants will be the same as what's on the property. So I think that's the overall plan is for that habitat uplift and that includes terrestrial and aquatic wildlife, and as well as the vegetation management. So being managed holistically, I think, for all of those things.
And I think maybe addressing the wildfire piece, it maybe doesn't tie as directly to the stream restoration, but we've had local volunteer fire department already out. They did chainsaw training and took down a bunch of existing standing dead on the parcel 4 property. That was coordinated with AVLT. So Jared has taken a very proactive approach to that. We have 2 wildland fire reports on each of the residences and are doing some thinning and cutting back and strategic planting and opening up gaps between groves of trees and that sort of thing to prevent spread. So I think there's a lot of awareness and there's a lot of activity, not so much associated with this application.
One more thing I would like to add is the understanding of the wildlife conditions on the property are kind of two-part. So there's the desktop review where we can go and look at all the publicly available data for things like critical wildlife habitat. And so parcel 4 specifically is severe winter range and a winter concentration area for elk, mule deer, and potentially moose. And we all know that they're there. We understand that they're there. It's the in coordination with CPW that has not initiated specific changes to the plans or to the construction schedule. But what we will do in coordination with AVLT and their conditions of approval that have to do with migratory birds as well as other wildlife is have our team's wildlife biologist out a week before we mobilize into that area to do, it's very quick and easy for them to do bird and other wildlife surveys. So we would call that a wildlife survey. If we identify anything that would require or suggest a changing of that program, we would do so. And so then we would also, we're working on the construction management schedule as well. And a lot of it has to do with when we expect to get permits. So we don't have a detailed schedule to show you today. But we also recognize that the implementation of this project is likely not the way we would typically like to build a stream, which is you start at the top and work your way all the way down. We may have schedule opportunity over here, and then we need to be out of the wetted channel, and we can go do some grading over here, obviously jumping around as little as possible, but there's likely to be a nonlinear kind of construction path for this project based on those recommendations.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, Greg?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Very, very thorough, and it's encouraging to see what you have in mind and how you've presented it. Of course, we're all concerned about what the end result will look like, and the owner talked about that it was very unkempt and unmanicured, at first sight. And I keep thinking, well, that might be. I'm a little nervous. I think back to Floyd Watkins and the trout farm that was just upstream from there years ago, where they manicured it into something artificial. It looked like a Disney park, and so there, of course, there was a huge reaction in the community, and I think George was probably part of that, along with Hunter Thompson and the rest of just talking about how this doesn't fit. And so I can see that the aesthetic here has evolved dramatically since those days, and I appreciate that. Still, I'm concerned that at the end of the day, I guess success would be to have accomplished something that people wouldn't be able to tell had been touched at all. And I just wonder, is that I think you guys have that philosophy. Does your client agree?
It's
with
a great call out, and I think that is in review of my little monologue there, I certainly chose the wrong word. Manicured would be an aesthetic that I would puke over. It should feel cared for, but generally natural. Maybe not wild, but somewhere in the middle there. But manicured is definitely the wrong feeling. I think you can tell just from some of the changes that we've made to the historic cabin that sits right on Woody Creek Road that it's very much like, if somebody had just cared for this over the years, what should it look like in the most natural way? And that's going to be the aesthetic that drives our interest. We certainly don't want something where a massive landscape staff has to hit it every week in order to look the right way. That's far from what our interest is. So just to address that concern directly, I don't think you have to worry there.
Right, I really appreciate that, thank you, and you probably do know the history of some of the, things that happened up there, so, but that was my main concern, but I really do appreciate your attention to detail and that you've engaged these guys to really do the thorough work, and that's apparent here. Thanks.
Good. I'm glad they've been working their asses off. Pardon my French. So it's good to see that work, the results of that work, and I really appreciate what they're doing.
And I would say somewhat glibly, we're actually tearing out lawn to do this. We're not
Right,
installing
Yeah.
lawn to do this. So,
I noticed that.
I don't think that this will feel in any way manicured. We have created a couple of new ponds on the property as well, and have been working really hard to integrate those so that they look as natural as possible. And so this stream is almost a wilder extension of that.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? What is the purpose of the ponds or and the design selection relative to their placement? What, is it part of fulfilling a water right need? Is it,
Right. So
dive into that, because I did notice sort of, it looked like there's some kind of built
Yep.
or designed.
So there are 4 ponds. The first 2 are augmentation ponds, so those are associated with the Basalt Water Conservation District augmentation plan.
What are they augmenting for?
For irrigation water, so evaporation loss during storage for irrigation. And then we've built off of Pond 4, we have built a large pump vault that drives pressurized irrigation for the entire ranch, so 220 acres or something like that. So both Upper Mesas and Parcel 4 have, we're going from flood irrigation to pressurized irrigation. And so fundamentally, the lower 2 ponds are irrigation storage. They're also in the heart of the project, and so they look beautiful. But we've been working to make them as integrated from a wildlife perspective as possible. And I've taken CPW comments on that. But the majority of that is either augmentation for that water storage and evaporative losses, and augmentation to put back in the stream when there's a water call and we lose our irrigation rights.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But to be clear, those ponds aren't part of this application.
Correct. I was just trying to.
So they're not interacting with the stream restoration elements?
No, the diversion point has been moved from the National Forest Service property to the top of Pond 1. Mm-hmm. So our irrigation diversion point interacts for a very tiny piece, and there's one new irrigation structure there. Mm-hmm. But they're not interacting with the stream.
And you proposed some pools along the restoration strategies.
Yep.
Can you talk about those a little bit as well?
I mean, I think I'd turn that back over to
Yeah,
Jason.
specific to the Collins Creek restoration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons the pools are proposed. Number one, it's as a kind of a natural function of the way the stream would develop, particularly in a meandering format and not a kind of a beeline down the hillside, is you're going to get that riffle pool run characteristic to it. And with a stream that has at the end of the summer season very low flows, having some pools provides some opportunity for refuge for any kind of aquatic life that may be in there instead of it just running completely dry. So those pools are meant to be have some holding capacity associated with them. They are also places in a steep stream section like that where we can create opportunities for it's basically resting, right? So it's not just a continuous current if there's fish that are able to get up there. And then that variety in the stream grade helps us to create variety, and you'll see variety in the natural vegetation that happens around those different stream typologies, as well as a significant amount of variety that happens in the stream bed itself. So very different macroinvertebrate population in a riffle than you'll see kind of at the edge of a pool or at the tail out of a pool. So it is creating that natural variety is really what those are all about.
I had another question, but I'm forgetting what it is currently, so maybe I'll be re-sparked. Francie, do you have any questions on the presentation, and then we'll dive into code requirements?
I don't have questions. I'm kind of blown away by that presentation. I hardly know where to begin. It looks pretty amazing. It's very Well, it's very well verified by all of the other organizations, and so I'm satisfied with that presentation. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Francie.
All right. I'm gonna go ahead and cut you off. Okay. All right. So, there we go. So the applicant, like we said, is requesting activity envelope and site plan review. The board is familiar with this type of review and that you usually look at some kind of structure that goes with the activity envelope. And typically, these code sections that we're going to go through state that you can't encroach into these stream and creek corridors. So the exception to that section is 71050E, which simply, it's pretty simple, states that you can encroach into these areas if it's for stream restoration. So, right, the board needs to determine whether this project is truly stream restoration or are they trying to do something else. In addition, so basically they need to comply with the stream and river corridor section as well as the floodplain section. In addition to those sections, staff had the applicant address other sections such as the geologic hazard section to deal with the alluvial fan issues, as well as some grading and water courses sections. So I'll go through those now. So the first one is the site preparation and grading section. In general, staff found compliance with this section and that all the grading and fill, revegetation, as you saw, the construction access was very deliberately and carefully thought about how they're going to do the construction access in relation to the existing activity envelopes, and all that's going to occur within this stream restoration activity envelope. So just to be clear and kind of to Greg's point, this envelope is just for stream restoration. So right in the future, they can't come in and say, I've got an activity envelope, I want to, put my patio out here. Staff found that the grading, the proposed grading has been minimized in the extent possible while addressing all their goals, including that debris flow channel. We also recognize that they're proposing to revegetate and have that vegetation come in to a similar height to what's existing in 2 years post-construction. Jason talked about the construction techniques to some degree. And right, that they did provide that preliminary construction report, which I think satisfies our planning engineer's concern that they need to start really thinking about access and timing and such. So the next section is the water courses and drainage section. Staff found that they have done a great job at engineering this project to address the 25 and 100-year rainfall events. These events are proposed to be managed through 2 dry wells, 4 detention ponds, the 2 fishery ponds, and 2 augmentation ponds. Those reports also showed that no additional runoff will be created. Let's see, what else should we hit on here? The applicant did represent that mostly the cut and fill will be balanced on site. Obviously, there's going to be some boulders and gravel brought in for some of that reconstruction, but like they said, they're going to do their best to source everything from on site. And as Jason mentioned, they're also complying with the federal requirements for those nationwide permits. They've got their nationwide permit 14, and they're anticipating the 27 coming in any day, which will be required at our building permit review or earth moving permit review. The next section that they do need to comply with is the floodplain section. So Woody Creek is mapped within the FEMA floodplain. Collins Creek is not a mapped FEMA floodplain. And as you saw in the application, they've engaged Right Water engineers who's completed extensive studies modeling those floodplains. And our planning engineer reviewed all those studies as well and found that they were in compliance with the floodplain section. And lastly, like Jason said, there's going to be annual monitoring to ensure that the proposed floodplain and ecological goals are met. And then our planning engineer is requiring a no-rise report for Woody Creek and those associated models for that floodplain permit. Okay, and then additionally, like I mentioned, we also had the applicant address the geologic hazard section of our code because we found that parcel 1 and 4 are mapped within that alluvial fan hazard area. The applicant did complete these geologic hazard reports and did that modeling. And based on those reports, they designed a debris flow structure. And CGS, like I mentioned before, reviewed this work and in general agreed with the findings that the hazard would be mitigated. Okay, and then the most important section is the river and stream corridors and wetlands section. So, like I said, basically the board needs to determine whether or not this is truly a stream restoration project. To allow this work to occur in this area. Staff found that this is a stream restoration project and that they're not proposing any additional development in this area except for that alluvial debris channel. They're going to use natural species and materials to revegetate. There will be obviously temporary disturbance, but staff found that the overall outcome of this project will greatly compensate for that disturbance. And then lastly, AVLT and OST did review this full application, was on site, and did approve this project and found it in compliance with the conservation easement. So with that, staff recommends that the BoCC approve the resolution approving the Mainland Ranch P1 and P4 activity envelope and site plan for stream restoration. And that's all I have.
Questions for Tammy? No questions for Tammy?
I've got one, which
Go.
is just, sorry. I didn't say that.
Please, go ahead.
Weed management post given so much just.
Can't hear.
I get to say it twice then. Weed management, post-construction, how do we ensure that, given the amount of disturbance, sort of post-disturbance activity and weed management, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, the property currently has an integrated weed management program that's being implemented right now, and Ryan spoke to it a little bit. And there are a particular number of means and methods that they prefer to use, and a number of things that they don't want to use. They don't want to use chemicals on the property. And so that weed management program has been written specific to the management style that the owners are interested in pursuing. That is a condition of the earth moving permit as well, so that will be submitted. And another condition of the earth moving permit is during active construction operations of this project that a weekly report will be submitted, and that will be done by the general contractor on site with photographs. We haven't talked about this, but we would also submit that to AVLT when we're working on parcel 4 in any of the conservation easement areas, because we don't want to get to the end of the project and have someone be unsatisfied. So keeping communication up during the duration of that active work is an important part of the process for us. And then we also have monitoring and mitigation requirements by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and so that requires reporting as well, including weed management. So there are a number of kind of thresholds of oversight and management that's going to require upkeep of that.
And we have a ranch manager that takes it personally, very, very personally.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? My question that I remembered was relative to, I guess, the extent and amount of earth removal that you anticipate happening. I was thinking about it in terms of the areas where you're trying to flatten out the banks a bit. What does that look like?
I don't think we have volumes. We'll need to develop those volumes for the earth moving permit itself. In Woody Creek, there will be little to no export. There's one significant bank that needs to be laid back, and that'll be distributed in the vicinity of that bank, which is a pasture area. And so there's kind of a fenced sloping pasture area where we're basically doing a cut and then a distribution of that fill material nearby and a revegetation. And so in Woody Creek, it's effectively balanced even within the stream corridor. In Collins Creek, particularly up in the debris channel, there will be a significant amount of cut. And right now, I think the intent and the commitment is to have that material be used on site. So there's some locations where there's irrigation pond. It's all a relatively sloping site. So irrigation pond needs embankment material. So there are ways to use that material on site. And by and large, the ongoing operations there have separated topsoil. We've collected, my brain's not working anymore. We've collected wetland topsoil and set that aside to be used again in the wetland benches. And then any of that kind of unsuitable for topsoil under material, it gets used as embankment in other parts of the project. One example that's been completed in the last couple of years is that some of the driveways have had to be widened to be in compliance with county requirements. And so where we have cut, we have generally been able to find places to use that fill material. And so we'll need to figure that out in detail as we're moving towards submitting for that earth moving permit and have very specific answers to that.
And then maybe you may have covered this, you guys covered a lot, but what is the expected duration for all of this work?
Have really tight windows because of all the wildlife regulations. So we can essentially work, I think, from about.
Oh, you need to turn your mic on, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't as used to Jeffrey as for listening for that prompt. We have very specific windows set by CPW and Forest Service and AVLT, and so most of our work has to occur, I believe, between August 15th and October 15th, just the way that those windows are framed. So we'll probably have to do this in either 2 or 3 seasons. So there'll be short impacts in the fall. It's the overlap of nesting birds, critical elk and mule deer range, and not disturbing spawning fish in Woody Creek.
Sure.
So.
Any evidence of beavers doing some of this work for you?
There's one beaver pond at the lower end of Woody Creek that is starting to do this work for us, and one of our conditions was to not take any active management against beavers on the property, and we, of course, comply with that.
Does that persist into future?
It's
it's
an
Is
ongoing
that a persistent?
requirement.
So if a new beaver moves in, you treat it the same?
Exactly. That's actually the requirement, is to not take any active management against beavers.
Okay.
Sort of.
I don't know if our
indefinitely. They've
our
been moving
standards
up
have,
Woody
have
Creek
caught
for
up
a
with the
while.
beaver activity.
But we do have one active pond, and we're not doing any work in the neighborhood of that pond, really. So, because they're doing the work for us.
Okay. Yes, Greg.
Question just regarding the, regarding setbacks from the water courses. How are the setbacks affected, and how did you approach that at ComDev?
I mean, essentially, we're saying there are no setbacks. They've got to get in the middle of the stream. The setbacks don't apply when you're digging in the stream. Like I said, this is a specific activity envelope just for stream restoration.
Right.
So this isn't gonna.
So it's not like they're already too close to structures or.
So there are some pre-existing improvements that do encroach into our new 100-foot setback requirements.
Right.
And those are pre-existing to that zoning change.
Right.
So those are allowed to continue.
It seems like a pretty tight space, but I was assuming that, but I was,
Yeah.
thank you.
Relative to that, what's the plan related to the cattle? And will they continue to have access to the stream and degrade the stream similarly to where we're at now?
I think Jason spoke to that. The whole idea is that there would be exclusion zones, and there would be some places where they would have managed access, in places where the habitat could handle it a little bit better, and they wouldn't have unfettered access to the entire stream corridor.
Are you moving that? Like, is that planned to be movable fencing?
I think the answer is yes over time, that is part of the adaptive management strategy for the overall habitat areas, is the ability to say it seems like a good idea to create an access point to a pool with low graded slope, and that's not working well, then that will become an exclusion zone. We would open up another area. So that's all of the management practices are meant to be adapted over time, including any of the access corridors. We fully expect the stream itself to adapt over time on its own as well.
Mm-hmm. And then because this is probably for Tammy, because this had a 15-year vesting, are things like wildlife-friendly fencing tied to the code from when they got that fencing, or should that be what's in place now, like based on our, since their permits are recent?
Yeah, so I think their vesting is more associated with the permits that are open now. So I don't know of any fencing. I guess you were alluding to that there was some fencing that was being pulled out actively by the owner, but
conservation easement itself for both parcels 3 and 4 have very specific wildlife-friendly fencing requirements, and some of that has been kind of over time, because there was extensive barbed wire fencing, and that's been replaced over time. And then any of the new fencing that's going in, it is being done to meet current county standards.
Any new
Including
fence
this that we're talking about that you might
Yes,
need to move for
that's right.
management and
Yeah,
access.
any new fencing is going to have to comply with our current code.
Okay, thank you. All right, other questions? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing on this item. Mainland Ranch P1 LLC, Mainland Ranch P4 LLC, activity and site plan review for stream restoration projects. If there is anyone in person who would like to come up? Would you like to come up? Okay, can we make some space at the table?
Yeah.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Please go ahead. The microphone light should be red so you know it's on. And please tell us your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, now it's on.
Okay,
got it on.
good, great.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jennifer Craig, and I'm a neighbor of this project. And let's see, I have a couple of concerns. The presentation was pretty amazing. Thank you. I think my biggest concern is really considering the impact, not just on the property, but on the road and the Woody Creek Road, and the impact of the construction traffic coming up and down the road, which has been massive since the change of ownership. I would say the impacts are the numbers of vehicles, the size of the vehicles, the speed of the vehicles, the wear and tear on the newly resurfaced Woody Creek Road, the impacts to wildlife. I'm bringing that up mainly, again, it has to do a little bit with the traffic on the road, vehicles driving incredibly fast. Not all of them are going to the Graves property. I would imagine some of them are not generated off the Graves property, but a lot of them are. And I thank you for bringing up the fencing, because there is some fencing on the property that I think is above the specs. The post and rail fence that is basically mostly around the perimeter of parcel 4, is 56 inches high in a lot of places. I think some of the rails are lower, but the top rail, and I've measured it in a variety of areas, comes up to 56 inches. Some places it's 54, which is what the county says is okay, but Parks and Wildlife recommends a 40 inches is ideal, 42 inches is better. So I don't know why the county standards are saying 54 inches. I think that's way, way, way too high. And the reason that's important to me is the elk do travel through this corridor constantly. They had a much easier time when it was an old rundown barbed wire fence than they are now with the really high 3-rail pole fence, which is a huge impediment. So that doesn't really have to do with the stream flow, but I thought I'd bring it up because I think it goes hand in hand with this project. And the herd of elk that frequents the 3 properties, my property, the Graves property, and Pat Scanlon's property above, they travel back and forth constantly, pretty much year-round now. They used to never see elk up there in the summer, but now they're hanging out a lot in the summer as well, and they're constantly on the move. And last week I was up there on a Sunday, and there was a herd of about 100, and some of them had gotten into the Graves. Most of them were on my side of the fence, but the ones that got into the Graves property were having trouble getting back out of the property. And I was up there for several hours, and I called Jared, or I texted him, and I asked if I could go open the gate so that they could come out. And then he sent somebody down to open the gate, and that spooked the animals, who were just running back and forth around the fence. And these animals eventually all jumped the fence. And it's just, to do this more than once a day, or even once a day, to ever have to do it is too much for these animals. So I guess I'm just bringing this up because I think that in the interest of wildlife friendly, not only should it be looking at the stream habitat and trying to improve the stream habitat, but also let's just get rid of fences, or at least make openings, crossings, lowering rails. Anyways, that was one of the things that I wanted to discuss. And I also think another consideration as far as fencing goes is no boundary fencing. So property boundary fencing. I was going to bring up beavers for the willow management because the beavers do an incredible job of managing the willows. Let's see, what other things? I wanted to thank you, Greg, for bringing up Floyd, because I don't think too many people probably remember Floyd, but that also, when Floyd was doing his work further up the Woody Creek Road, again, it was just this onslaught of dump trucks and big, heavy equipment going up and down that road. And, those guys are driving the road every day, and they get tired of driving 25 or 30 miles an hour, and they are flooring it everywhere they can. And it's pretty frightening, actually, how fast the traffic is going. I was wondering if the Colorado Department of Water Resources had a chance to comment on the restoration plan. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but I was curious about that. And I think that's all of my comments.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there other folks online who want to comment on this application? Okay. I am seeing none. Does applicant or staff want to respond to anything you've heard at this point, or we can open up for board discussion or further questions? Go ahead.
I would respond to the fencing, I'm happy to work with Jared to address that. It seems like it's not that hard to drop a top rail some of the time, or seasonally, or
Well, and just in my
particular
experience with
crossings.
with domestic animals, cows and horses are not going to jump the 40 inches. Unless it's an unusual cow or a horse. I mean,
Thank
most
you.
of them are
Sorry,
not
we won't be able to hear, everyone won't be able to hear
sorry.
online with you. Thank you, though.
But we're happy to work together, so
Okay.
we have a history generally of working together. So.
All right, great. I
Happy
think
to
we would
address this.
welcome that. Other comments or questions?
Are we done with public comment, or?
We are done with public
Okay.
comment. There was no one else.
one else.
I closed the comment and brought it back to the board.
I appreciate Jennifer bringing up the traffic. We talk about traffic a lot when there's any development, especially in Woody Creek, it seems. And I understand, I've lived out there, and I've, a long time ago, and even then, is there something you can do to control, the speed and the number and the frequency of the construction vehicles? That's important. And are you phasing it in such a way that would be lowest impact? And just want to hear what you have to say about that. It's a concern.
Yeah, and it's my problem, honestly, as the owner's rep. So I get to go berate the subcontractors some more and let them know how embarrassed we were during this public hearing that they're not driving properly. I mean, it's just that simple. If we know who they are, we're happy to address them directly.
Right. And maybe establish just a protocol so that they know what to do.
I mean, I don't want to overpromise. We've been trying to establish a no smoking protocol for 4 years with mixed success. So I don't want to pretend like this is a silver bullet, but it's just an ongoing management problem.
Right,
So
right.
we're happy to address it.
Thank you.
Okay. Francie, any questions?
No, thank you, Kelly.
I guess I do have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
What are the check-ins? This is a one-read approval. You're going to move forward. How are you going to monitor it, Tammy, or how is this?
Yeah, so the next steps are for them to submit an earth moving and floodplain permit for both of the parcels. And with that, right, they'll need to do the construction management plan, the weed management plan, and there will be inspections associated with that. But right now, it would just, be those permit inspections. There's nothing further into the future planned at this point, unless you would like to propose something.
I just wanted to make sure that if people are complaining to neighbors, or there's a problem with the elk not being able to I'd love to see progress and just that we know about it, or it comes back to you at least, so you can keep track of that.
We'll definitely hear about it.
We'll definitely hear about it as long as we know what to do about it, right?
Right.
We
No,
have
that's
weekly
right.
with Josh Rice.
Right, he
We
did.
have a requirement of weekly reporting with Josh, so that'll be at the engineering level.
Right.
But once the permits are finished, then we don't have any follow-up past that.
Got it. Just as long as it's not a phone that doesn't get answered, if somebody's calling with an issue.
Yeah, we'll answer the phone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm just reviewing. Yes, go ahead, Jeffrey.
I don't think we're looking for a condition of approval, but I think given the delicacy and the intricacy and
Let's start though.
Now so Francie can hear you.
I'll be honest, I'd love to see a post-action report on this. I'd love to see sort of the before and after, given the sensitivity and the extent to which you're working on both Collins and Woody Creek. I'm not looking to create a condition of approval per se, but certainly I think as a board we would love to see you back at the end of the project and lessons learned.
Don't we have to report anyway to U.S. Army Corps and CPW and AVLT? So
we would
adapt
welcome
those
that.
to
We're not looking again. I'm not looking to,
of that.
not looking to present an additional condition of approval. I'm saying we would really welcome to see how this is.
Those three organizations that you just mentioned have oversight post-construction, even through a monitoring phase. And the reason we can't articulate the monitoring phase for the Army Corps permit is that authorization hasn't been issued, and that's when they will issue the monitoring requirements and the reporting requirements. But there will be those. And ultimately the project has to meet AVLT and Pickens County open space and trail satisfaction. So, yeah.
Well, we'll adapt those for your consumption as well.
Thank you.
Okay. For just a little housekeeping here, I want to acknowledge we received an email with 3 documents from Tammy earlier today to include in the record, and I just want to check in and see if there's anything we need to change in order to adopt those or adopt any of the content within them. I know we have an activity envelope plan. Is this amended from what's in the packet?
No, it doesn't. So that was per my request, is that we didn't have just one overreaching total activity envelope for the whole site. So that's what was provided to you. What ultimately gets signed and recorded by you will be that overreaching, as well as we'll require them to do, the smaller reaches, just because the project's so big to capture it on one page is ridiculous.
Yeah, okay.
So that was that piece of information. There was a construction management per the planning engineer's request. And then it was the applicant's response to a lot of the referral comments that Jason somewhat went over in the presentation. So.
Okay, and have we assured that those have all been captured in the resolution before us, or will they be incorporated in? Do we need to
I don't think we
incorporate
need
them
to
in
do-
them per
Yeah.
our adoption of the resolution?
I don't think there's any changes that are required with those.
Okay. Okay.
I had one minor housekeeping also. Ryan said thank you for making time for him to drop off. He had to drop off for family stuff, but thank you for making time for him to
No, glad
present.
you could
So
join us.
thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, other questions? The requirements of board members? All right, well, with that, then I will look for a motion to approve the resolution as presented.
I would make a resolution of the Board of
Motion.
County Commissioners.
I'll second.
Oop.
Well, there you go. That's all we need right
We knew
there.
what we were talking about, yes. Okay, a motion by Jeffrey, a second by Francie. Any further discussion?
Looking forward to celebrating when you get it done and show it off.
We are too. Thank you.
Okay. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All
Thank
right.
you, and thank you all for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
All right, let's go on. We have a few open discussion items. You want to start? You want me to start? Oh, wait. First item before Tammy leaves. Yes, some scheduling. So looking at going over agendas today, which we do when Jeffrey and I do with staff as chair and vice chair. Jeffrey is going to be out on June 11th, and we have an administrative appeal that day, and thought that it might make sense for the whole board to be present for that. Tammy, you are the staff liaison for that appeal, so we wanted to check and see if that could be bumped to the 25th of June. Currently, there was no other land use scheduled for the 25th of June, but we never know if that's actually the case or not.
No, that's accurate. I think we would just need to check in with the applicant, since I imagine they kind of have a team planning to present, but we can do that, and if works on their end.
Okay.
We push that.
Yeah.
All right. Let us know, or at the next round of our future agenda packet, it can just show up on the 25th. Is fine.
I would also.
Yes, sir.
I
Go
would
ahead.
also offer, so you've got something else to go with. So I'm booked 12 to 4 on that day. So if it could not be moved, I could join you at 4 p.m. on the 11th, which I know we're
Good to
not
know.
scheduled, but again, as a backup of not moving it, I would make myself available after 4 p.m. on the 11th. If that
Great.
helps.
That does help. Thank you. And then I wanted to check in with the board. I'll have to, I guess, talk to Patty separately. Our water attorneys will be visiting July 16th through the 18th to do a variety of site visits and meetings up here. And so I wanted to see if we could do a executive session with them around midday on the 16th down in Basalt, because they are going to do site visits in Basalt in the morning, and then site visits up the Crystal in the afternoon, evening, and so an exec session on the 16th in Basalt would be
That's June
great.
16th?
Sorry, July.
July, sorry.
16th.
Thank you. That's a Wednesday. Sounds good.
Wednesday. It's an off Wednesday for
It's
us.
an off Wednesday. Are there no other days that are part, our schedule's probably full. If that's the best day you can come up with, okay.
So noon the earliest would be the start, but we got to suss that out a little bit.
I can do that. I like them. I'll meet with them.
I can't be there by noon.
No, I know. I just said the earliest, knowing
Okay.
you're just trying to create a window based on lots of moving parts. Do you know, would that work for you, Jeffrey? Do you know?
It does.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I've
All
put
right.
the
So
calendar
it
ready.
looks like we can try to make that work for at least 4 of us, and I'll check in with Patty. Okay, that was my open discussion items. I can turn it back over to John Peacock.
Yeah, we have Levi here. Levi, do you want to come talk about the letters? And then if the board wishes, we can revisit the parks dedication fee. I'm a little bit better prepared today.
Great.
Hey, Kelly, while everybody's
Yes.
got their calendar out,
Yes.
can we talk about June 3rd?
June
which
3rd.
is your joint day with the Open Space and Trails Board.
Yes, and City of Aspen.
And, well, I didn't know about that.
That's in the afternoon,
We had talked about extending the joint executive session, which is currently scheduled to begin at 10:30, I believe, and continue to 11:30. We had talked about extending that to noon. I did hear back from Gary Tenenbaum, and he said it would be possible to start exec on that day, the joint executive session at 10 instead of 10:30, and that would work with their public session planning for that day. So if that's okay with you all, I think it would work better for open space staff to start the joint executive session at 10 on that day, as opposed to running till noon. So the meeting would be, the joint exec would be from 10 until 11:30 that day, which would provide you all some time to have a break before lunch and have lunch on what I'm hearing is going to be a long day.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a good thing.
Well, and we will have a pretty substantial break between our work session and then the joint meeting with the city.
Okay.
Are folks okay to start at 10 next Tuesday, June 3rd?
Yep. And then
Yes.
how late do we go with the city?
Oh, you're not here. That's right. Okay. And then we're scheduled to go from 4 to 6 with the city. And we will have a pretty big, I think, a break from 2:30 to 4. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Back to Levi. Op-eds. Letters.
Thank you.
Op-eds.
Good afternoon, Board. Levi Borst, Management Analyst, just here on a couple follow-up items from yesterday's work session. So the first is the Surface Transportation Authorization Letter, which we discussed and got thumbs up for yesterday, was signed by the chair and shipped off this morning. So I've heard back from Senator Bennett as well as Rep. Hurd's office thanking us for that outreach, and they're sending it to their DC folks. So I think that's super positive. And then the second couple of items was that we had 2 other letters to consider whether or not we wanted to sign on. And I shared those yesterday afternoon with the board for discussion today to see if they had any direction for staff on how to move forward. So I don't have any new material to present. I'm just here for the discussion.
I can
Thank you.
weigh in.
Greg, go ahead.
I did speak with Hillary Henry in Bennett's office this morning, who assured me and shared the letter that the GORP Act was introduced by our bipartisan committee of senators and congressmen on the 15th, and they'd be very grateful if we were to acknowledge Hurd's bold gesture and joining them. And so the letter about the GORP Act, I originally had thought it would just be a letter, but it could certainly be an op-ed, but it's also a letter to him directly, just so his office sees it and he understands. And it's a way to show gratitude for cooperation, which is so rare anymore these days. I think it's really important. Though I think we have a draft that would probably need to be modified somewhat because this one I think it was put together as an op-ed, but it needs to be it'd be a letter to him from the chair representing the board, and so it needs to be reformatted somewhat, and I can work on that, or I can ask somebody else to, if there's somebody who wants to put that together. So that's the GORP Act. The second one is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Act. They're talking about eliminating the budget for that, really sending us backward. And the gist of that letter is that our county, and our county in particular, our state in particular, lead the way for the nation in adoption of electric vehicles. 30% of the new vehicles purchased in the state were electric vehicles last year. And we have a huge constituency of Coloradans and Pitkin County residents who are now depending on EVs to move around and would like the support of built-out infrastructure. They're expecting almost 1 million EVs by 2030. We're at 200,000 now, and it's growing rapidly. So this would be to encourage our congressmen to support the NEVI, which is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Bill, rather than seeing it be gutted. And so we have a letter to that effect as well. It was shared from CC4CA, and Jeffrey and I both recognized that it needed some tweaking. I think it should be a positive letter and a congratulatory and grateful letter rather than the tone of it was just slightly too sharp, I thought. So that's being I thought I had it rewritten, and I sent a version, but since then I've made some changes. So now you may have the most recent version that I shared, Jeffrey, or maybe Levi does. I would love to have ideally the entire board approve it and sign it and send it both to Congressman Hurd and present as an op-ed, because I think we'll need public to weigh in and support and express their concern to their electeds directly. So those are the two letters. And I think they're kind of in keeping with what we've been doing. I know there's a sensitivity to writing letter after letter after letter, but the fact is it seems like the situation demands that with everything that's been happening on the national, federal level regarding defunding everything.
Thanks, Greg. Jeffrey.
I'm going to, so for the NEVI, I would bring it back to what we've done too. I would include the work that we've just done. I would include the work that Matt and Brian Pettit just did on the 400 kW charger. So I think the letter would be stronger if it describes the recent achievements of Pitkin County in terms of electrification, the microgrid, and the ground source heat pump that we're working on. So I think we could provide additional sensitivity and personalization to the letter based on the work that we've already undertaken financially. And
I like that suggestion.
That's great. I agree.
I think the other driver is that I don't know what percent. If we looked at ACRA, what percentage of people arrive here by car? Again, the missing piece, the reason that we're so excited about the 400 kilowatt chargers at Service Center Road is we now have a way to go from Denver to Highland, that's a critical. That infrastructure is critical for the state of Colorado. So I would say this is a letter for Hurd, Bennett, and Hickenlooper, and here's the part that we're playing in that. So thank you.
Thank you. No, those are great suggestions. And I was working in that direction, but you bring up some good points that I want to incorporate. And I can share this with Levi, or if you're the appropriate one to work on this with John, or however, probably you. Sure. I'll share that, and we can cobble the next version together. I think it needs to go out fairly soon. But I.
So can I be clear or
Go
clarify
ahead.
some things? So related to the GORP Act letter, I think it's I think it's great. I think it's mostly written really great. And as I understand it, is this something I would submit on behalf of the whole board? So it'd be under my name, representing the Board of County Commissioners.
That's how I thought this has that much more gravitas and power when your name is on it.
I don't think Hurd knows who I am, but maybe he will if I'm published in the paper. And then the other letter the other document, I guess, is this a letter that we send to the three and then you publishes? Because some of the languages here is I'm an EV owner, blah, blah,
Right,
blah.
right. I could do that.
I just wonder if we write it like as a letter from us that's generic, and then you're welcome to publish it as a letter under your name.
Fine, I can do that. We can work it up.
Including those personalized things and with the recommended updates.
We do have 3 EV owners on our board, come to think of it.
Yeah, I know. And one day I will be a fourth to join you, but I just keep buying used clunkers to drive into the ground.
It's a habit, I know.
They have their own embedded carbon that I'm valuing, a little bit about this NEVI letter. I wonder if we should just be a little more generic about some of the stuff, or just a little more factual statements.
Right. Yeah, it needs that.
Yeah, is what I would suggest for it.
Yeah. So we'll rework
less
it.
platitudes, more fact-based.
Yeah.
I think would kind of be a more productive letter.
That's my take on it as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm okay with that. And Francie, is that?
I'm fine.
Sound good?
Bring
okay.
it back to you as soon as we can.
Okie doke.
Thanks, Levi.
All right. Thank you. What else?
Well, kind of an unusual circumstance, and right, we may need some advice. Earlier, we approved a grant for jail behavioral health.
Yes.
And as Dan was walking out of having that approval, he got a text that the amount of the grant had changed. I think, I think my take is we probably need to revisit that grant approval and.
Well, we can do a motion to reconsider it right now, right?
Yep, right now.
But maybe I'll let you explain a little more.
Dan Felon, Jail Division Chief. As I was leaving, after I told you the funding was dropping to $178,000, I received an email from the BHA saying, we found more money and it's going back to the original amount per the original letter. So it will be the $183,000, not $178,000. I know that I had said I was going to send you that new document, but now I don't need to, so I just came back to let you know that the funding had changed to that $183,000 original amount.
Well, that's fantastic. Can I ask a procedural question of Rise? Since this was a public hearing, is there any problem with renoticing or anything if we're changing this?
I don't think so. I think you can reopen the matter today. I guess reopen the public hearing and see if there's anybody. I
Which we had
understand the
no
problem. Nobody would be able to know that they'd be able to participate at this point. Typically, a board member could make a motion to reconsider an item anytime up
I can hardly hear you, Rye.
I'm sorry. Typically, a BoCC member could make a motion to reconsider a prior item anytime up until the next regular meeting after which the item was approved. But I do think you can reopen it today, reopen the public comment period, and approve the motion. If the board were concerned about it, you could set, even though it's not an emergency motion, you could set a confirmatory reading on the matter at the next meeting to provide the opportunity for people to make public comment. I believe the resolution it's a formal resolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it necessary or optional?
I think it's optional to set the further confirmatory reading to provide an opportunity for more public comment should the board be interested in taking it.
Yes, Greg.
I just think it's not a significant change. It's great that they bumped it back up to 183 from 175 or whatever it would have been. And so I think that it's not really necessary to reopen public comment on the topic. I think it's a positive. I have trouble believing anybody would come out against an increase of a $5,000 grant. So I would like to make a motion that we amend our.
You have to make a motion to reconsider the item.
I'd like to, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to reconsider this item and get this taken care of today.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let me write this down. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion by Greg, seconded by Jeffrey to reconsider item number 6, which is, did I call the question? I did. Okay. Well, everyone said aye. Reconsider item 6, which is a resolution approving a Fourth Amendment to a contract with Colorado Department of Human Services, Behavioral Health Administration, providing funding for jail-based behavior services, which in the interim of the 3 hours since we discussed it has been increased from $178,000 to $183,000, and we would be happy to accept the additional $5,000. Is there any discussion before I open the public hearing? Thanks, Dan, for catching that.
Yeah.
All right, let me open the public hearing on this item. If anyone's hanging on out there. Spaz, could you just double check for, to dot all of our I's? All right, I see no one. I will close the public hearing on this item and look for a motion to approve the resolution with the amended amount. The re-amended amount. Thank you, Francie.
Second.
Thank you, Greg. Any further discussion?
If we wait a little longer, will the amount?
That would be nice, but I don't foresee that
Go back
aspect
down.
happening.
Yeah, Dan, keep going. You're on a roll.
That's probably the quickest $5,000 you made since your last trip to Vegas, eh?
Probably, yeah.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad I could get back before you guys left.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
We're
sounds
always
good.
willing to take more money when it's offered to us.
Okay.
Likewise.
Other open discussion?
So yesterday we started talking about the parks dedication fee. There was a conversation that the board was having about potentially making a contribution to Carbondale for their pool project. As staff understood it from the last meeting, which I was not at, the question from the board was, are there, how much is left in the park dedication fees, and are there other potential asks that may be coming to the board, so you can consider the contribution within that context. So I've got some of that information for the board if you'd like me to share that. So in total, there's $731,695 in the park dedication fee. The board has dedicated up to $200,000 of that as match for a grant for the Redstone Historic Museum. And that's only if the grant is received for that, but I think we would assume right now that those dollars are committed based on previous board action, leaving $531,695 available in the fund. There are some potential projects forthcoming that had their eyes potentially on using some of this funding. Healthy Rivers and Streams is still working on the Basalt River Park. There's about $1.5 million left in that project. Staff had indicated a desire to request up to $500,000 in the park dedication fees for that project. That has not been discussed or decided on with the board. Obviously, that would take a big chunk out of the $531,000 that's left. Other potential projects that were identified, we have the Thomasville lime kilns. That's budgeted at $365,000 in 2025. Staff was sent out to seek grants. Sorry, my voice is not failing me today for some reason. But there'd likely be a match, whether that match comes from general fund or Parks dedication fees had not been determined by the board, but that's a potential use that was identified. And then two others that don't have dollars or requests and are conceptual at this point. One is common areas within the AABC, green belts, opportunities potentially for future pocket parks. Those have not been specifically identified. It's something that is called out by GR as a potential as we're looking at right-of-ways and those sorts of things. But we have no particular project planned or no budget for that yet. And then the Soldner Center, which is still doing fundraising, would be a potential if they came to the board with a request, which there hasn't been a specific request. So those were the list of potential uses. I think that the Healthy Rivers and Streams is an up to that is an eminent project that those funds could be applied to. Similarly, the Thomasville lime kilns are an eminent project, but we've been asked to go out and try and get more funding through grants before bringing that back. And so we don't have a grant amount or timeline that the fund would be used for. And so that would be, those would be the projects that would be possibilities in addition to what the board was discussing with the Carbondale pool.
And we don't have a formal request on an amount from the Carbondale pool, right? We haven't received it.
There wasn't a request that came from Carbondale. My understanding is that was initiated at the board table here.
Yeah, Francine,
Well,
I
it's
chatted
my
about
understanding
this.
that we were waiting to invite Carbondale to come and talk to us after we had this information.
Mhm.
They're ready. But we hadn't decided, you guys hadn't decided whether you wanted to hear from them.
Okay, what do folks think? Yes.
Well, they're all worthwhile projects. I would, if I were to rank them in importance to me, and I think on projects that we've already undertaken, the River Park project to me is the most important. I think to get that finished after many, many years of our own investment and toil, and I think to John Ely's time spent on that, it's a recognition of his legacy. I think that's where I would put my money. We've kind of made a commitment to Redstone in that they're raising money and asking for money and receiving grants based on the grant that we, the challenge grant we put out to them, so it would be pretty hard to pull that away. And I haven't heard from them lately. I'm assuming things are on track, but I do know they've raised a substantial amount of money, and the encouragement came from our challenge. I don't have an awful lot of concern about the future of the lime kilns. I don't think they're going to go anywhere, and I don't think very many people actually even know they exist, and so that's pretty low on my schedule. The pool's a great idea. Maybe we can put some money toward it in the coming years, but they haven't even come to us yet, and it's not in our county, is it? It's town of Carbondale. We certainly like them and appreciate them, but it seems far afield to me compared to the projects that we have within our borders ready to go. That's where I am. I was hoping we had a large pool of money so we could help, but it doesn't appear to be that way. And I'd still like to help somehow.
Thank you. Other input, Francie.
Okay, well, I'll do a similar thing as Greg did. I agree about the lime kiln project. I think there's no rush on that. I don't really see it as a park. I guess it's maybe recreation or something to go see it. And Healthy Rivers and Streams won't they be getting some tax money for finishing this project? I'm not sure about that, but it seems like they would.
Good
But I
question.
think with whatever it is, 550,000 or something, that I would not be in favor of giving all of that to the basalt project. I think maybe we could do a little splitting up here. I think the Carbondale project will affect a lot of people. And a lot of them are from Pickton County. So I think that would be my first choice. I think we should at least hear from them. I mean, because they've been waiting now, I think, about a month, right, Kelly, since we first brought this up, to hear whether or not we want to hear from them. So I think we ought to at least give them the opportunity to present to us before we make a decision.
Well, Francie, I've only talked to you. I didn't talk to anyone at Carbondale.
No, I know, but when you called me, when you suggested it, that was about a month ago, right?
Probably, yeah.
I'm
that
just
sounds
trying to
about right.
remember how long it's been, so,
Okay.
anyway.
And we do have some Healthy Rivers folks who just showed up listening to us chatting. You guys really hang on there. That's great. So you heard all about our jail reconsideration. And do you want to come up and give us an update on the river park? Because it would
why
be
would this
helpful.
be park funds?
Hmm?
Why is it park funds and not Healthy Rivers funds? That's a good question. I need a reminder.
Yeah, exactly.
Say that again, Greg, sorry.
Why would we draw from the parks funds when we have a Healthy Rivers fund?
Well, I think there was discussion because we are supporting the $1 million money towards Shoshone. So that's $300,000 every year out of our budget. So we had talked a little bit about, using some of the park dedication funds towards the development of the final phase build out of the park. So 300,000, we're a sales tax funded group. We don't use any other funds from the county for, any of the general fund money. So we were hoping to use that as maybe in exchange for some of the Shoshone money.
Interesting. Thank you. Could I ask another question?
Of course.
What's the income to the parks fund every year? How does that? It's not.
So we no longer collect a parks dedication fee. This is funding that has been sitting. It's been a number of years now since we've collected parks dedication fees. It's funds that have sat there. We replenish them during the Wexner land exchange to a tune of $700,000, if I recall correctly. As a thank you, as a reimbursement for projects that were done in the Crystal Valley. And so it's been a goal of ours to find appropriate projects for these funds and get them off of our books, as you do want to spend the impact fees within some amount of time of collecting them.
Sounds like
Thank you, Jeffrey.
We can.
Remind the board that the original
Can't
impact
hear it
fee.
all.
You cannot hear me?
I
Okay.
can't hear you when you talk unless you go right up to the mic.
Okay, maybe my microphone's not working because I'm shouting pretty loudly.
I can hear them.
I remind the board that the original impact fee was an open space and park dedication fund. I do think some of the impetus to utilize some of the park fund for the Pickens County Whitewater Park is to do some improvements to the park that would not necessarily qualify for the types of grants that we usually, or that the Healthy Rivers program usually qualifies for, because the work contemplated is not necessarily directly related to the river or in-channel work. It does seem like there's an opportunity to potentially split the baby here. I understand the ask from Healthy Rivers and Streams not to be for the entire remaining portion of the fund left. And absent knowing how much is requested from for the pool, it seems that perhaps there's an opportunity to do both. So I'm not saying you should do that, but there seems to be an opportunity to do that. So if we don't have a ballpark amount for what would be required for the pool, it seems like that would be some relevant information for you all to have before trying to figure out how to split up this pot of outstanding dollars. And
Well, they have an outstanding balance of, I think it's around 700,000 from their campaign. They're $700,000 short after their bond and after the fundraising that they've done, which has been going on now, I think, for a year and a half, maybe, at least a year. And they haven't made a request yet because they've been, maybe it's my mistake, but I hadn't told them to come and present because I was waiting to hear from everybody whether you wanted to hear from them. I had asked whether you wanted them to come and give a presentation. And then we were sort of waiting to get some information, so.
Yeah, I think
I
your
don't know
process
exactly
is.
how much they would ask for. I'm sure they'd be happy for anything.
Thanks, Francie. And what is the outstanding amount still for the park?
The engineer, I mean, we put it out to bid, and the lowest bid was 1.75. We did put in for the CPW Fishing is Fun grant, which we did not receive, for $250,000. We're still working with, our grant? DC Strategies to look at other opportunities, but and maybe some more park, like Rye was saying, park-related grants instead of river improvements. We've talked to, I think, the CWCB. We've talked to the River District, and none of them, this area of the park, fit into their program. So we have been looking for numerous different grant opportunities. So.
Could you tell us what it's for?
The actual build out, the final build out on the park is for the improvements on the bank. So it's a seating area. There's a connection from the top of the parking lot that will go all the way over to the bottom of the Whitewater Park area, connect to the boardwalk, and go all the way over to Fish Park. So people can now start to do, they can do loops. They can walk, play in the waves. They can do a loop, walk out to Fish Park, do another, run into the waves. And, the whole thing is for the water right? The recreational in-channel diversion. So we need to show use at the park. So this is a final improvement to get people to come down to the park, make it a nice, cool place to hang out and play, even though people do now. It's just the final phase of the project, which we started in 2016.
So it's revegetation that you're asking the money for?
Pardon me?
So you're asking the money for revegetation of the area, basically?
Seeding, revegetation, it's a whole park plan there. We can bring it back to you guys, the plan in more detail.
And procedurally, you're planning on doing that anyway as part of a budget
Yeah.
supplemental, correct?
Yeah, we've been talking with Connie about doing a budget supplemental. And we brought it, actually, we had a special meeting last night with the River Board, and they, approved the recommendation, bringing the request to you all, so.
One of the things with the Healthy Rivers and Streams fund that I think the board needs to, and it's a strategy question, right, is does the Healthy Rivers and Streams fund have the fund balance to do this project without, and do the Shoshone? Yes, it does. However, it has historically been the practice of the county and the board, or strategy, to keep a really significant fund balance in the Healthy Rivers and Streams fund should there be the opportunity for water rights acquisition, or should we end up having to pick a major fight, that would require a significant expenditure. And so we've always held more in fund balance in the Healthy Rivers and Streams Fund, so that basically you've got some powder dry should an opportunity present itself. As we go into the expenditure profile that we're talking about with the park and with exactly what the fund is there for, the water rights and Shoshone and our participation in that, it draws that fund balance down. And so the strategy of using the park's dedication fee is keeping some powder dry there, but it's really a strategy for the board. And as Rai said, there is an opportunity for a yes and there. It's just there may be an opportunity cost. Is that fairly?
Oh, I think that's very well put.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep.
And that's probably all the talking I'll do today. 'Cause
Okay,
I was just gonna ask, do you guys, would you like Carbondale to come and present on the pool?
Jeffrey.
Sorry, I was gonna answer a different question. I apologize.
I would. I mean, I continue to think that that fund, was created in a manner and intended to benefit residents in the Crystal. Not exclusively, perhaps, but I would at least like to hear about it before deciding. Jeffrey.
So I think it would be good faith on this board to help replenish the fund balance with Healthy Rivers and Streams. I think that would probably be the highest and best use of the park dedication fee relative to the overall needs of the county. To digress a little bit, when you look at the overall financial contributions, Pitkin County made $1 million contribution. Town of Basalt was $10,000. So if there's something that goes to a pool in Garfield, I think it's a pretty small amount. It's not going to move the needle in terms of the overall capital campaign. I think what moves the needle in terms of Pitkin County is really keeping Healthy Rivers and Streams fund balance healthy. So that would be sort of my view in terms of the highest and best way to spend it down.
Well, I'm not sure I totally agree with you. Anyway, I think there's a lot of residents in Pickett County that could benefit from direct use of spending the money than it's sitting in a bank account. Anyway, that's just some of how I look at it. Not to say I don't. My inclination would probably be to fund both to the best extent that we could.
I certainly, if you'd like to have Carbondale come up and make a pitch to us, what I'd want to hear from them is where else are they finding money? What have they done to raise money? How will they use any money we put forth as an incentive for others to donate? And realizing we do have, there's a lot of demand on these funds, which I hadn't contemplated until today. And I still keep my priorities with the River Park and Healthy Rivers. I think I agree with Jeffrey on that. But I'm willing to hear them out as long as their expectations aren't too high. If we can help nudge it along and get it closer to completion, that's great. If we can encourage Carbondale, Basalt, Snowmass Village, Glenwood Springs, and Garfield County and Eagle County to throw some money their way for the pool, I would love to do that too.
Okay.
So John, would you reach out to Lauren or somebody? Or do you want me to?
I can reach out to Lauren.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now, we're gonna wait before we make any decisions?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. And there's nothing urgent that needs to happen immediately.
Well, and I just,
clearly.
before our Healthy Rivers folks leave, I was hesitant to say this in the land use meeting because I want, I like everyone to have the opportunity to save face. But I think it would be great if in stream restoration projects, particularly if the Healthy Rivers staff can get referred. I feel like you guys have expertise, particularly in that type of land use application that would benefit our review. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, and we have been working with community development to come up with an appropriate referral system to the Healthy Rivers and Streams program, similar to what we do with open space. The difference being that open space is specifically called out in the charter as a referral agency on land use decisions, but it does seem appropriate to have a similar level of contribution on projects like the land use application that you just reviewed from Healthy Rivers and Streams. I think that would be appreciated.
We just
for
have this
community
internal
development as well.
expertise that we should take advantage of.
Definitely.
Yeah, cool. Okay, thanks.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there other open discussion items?
From staff.
All right, any from board?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, then I'll take a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Greg. Is there a second?
3:45 second.
Okay, thank you. Jeffrey, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, thank you all. Thank you, Grassroots.
Well done.
Thank you.